At 23 years old, the narrator reflects on her surprisingly decent life.
A desolate battlefield lies littered with swords and smoke surrounding a fallen warrior.
The red-haired woman accepts her imminent death, lamenting that hard work lacks rewards.
Spasms of violent coughing echo as her hand trembles over a deep bleeding wound.
She fears dying alone and unloved, feeling her entire existence has been utterly meaningless.
Her vision blurs and her senses dull as her final grip on consciousness slips.
A silver-haired soldier desperately sprints through the debris, screaming out for his fallen captain.
Theo collapses at her side, frantically pleading for her to stay alive as blood pools.
The red-haired woman mentally chides Theo for not fleeing as she previously ordered him to.
She ruminates on the perceived insignificance of her life while facing the cold end.
Watching Theo weep for her makes her feel that her life held some small value.
She marvels at seeing the stoic Theo cry for the very first time in their acquaintance.
A flashback reveals her as a child born under a curse that claimed her mother.
In this land, magical potency is tied to rank, dictating strict marriage customs for nobles.
Her father defied tradition to marry a lower-ranked woman, successfully producing a healthy son.
A dark transition emphasizes that the previous miracle of birth would not be repeated.
Her mother's health rapidly declined while she carried the weight of a powerful magical child.
Despite medical warnings to terminate the pregnancy, her mother chose to protect the growing life. The ultimate sacrifice was made as her mother perished during the act of giving birth.
Her father and brother were left devastated by the loss of the woman they adored.
Shattered glass represents the fragmentation of her family after she entered the world.
The young red-haired girl grew up surrounded by the intense, chilling resentment of her kin.
A blue military flag billows over the castle walls under a clear, bright sky.
A sudden, thunderous explosion of green and yellow magic erupts across the dusty battlefield ground.
The red-haired woman faces opposing soldiers with a stern and completely unwavering battle expression.
She turns away with a swift movement, her long red hair catching alight. With a powerful swing, she unleashes green magical energy while charging through the enemy ranks.
Her vibrant hair flows through the air during the intense and chaotic heat of combat.
She stands tall and determined, petals swirling around her as she grips her unsheathed sword.
The king bestows a royal commission upon her as she kneels in the grand hall. Ironically, the destructive magic that caused her family's hatred fueled her rise through military ranks.
A close-up highlights the prestigious medals and ornate gold cords adorning her commander's uniform.
She embodies the role of a capable leader, looking forward with confidence and silent pride.
A young, silver-haired man stands before her, marking the beginning of their complicated professional relationship.
After training an arrogant Theo with strict discipline, his attitude significantly improved under her tutelage.
Recognizing her own struggles within him, she felt a natural compulsion to protect the youth.
A close-up of Theo's face shows a sudden, bashful reaction to her uncharacteristic kindness.
Theo eventually rose to serve as her loyal second-in-command, surrounded by blooming, soft roses.
Their success drew the malicious, golden-eyed gaze of a queen who harbored deep-seated jealousy. The queen considered Theo, a concubine son, a threat that needed to be kept powerless.
To eliminate him, the queen sent them both to certain death on the front lines. Theo breaks down into tears, desperately begging her not to die and confessing his love.
His sudden declaration of love leaves the dying captain wide-eyed and completely stunned.
Her strength ebbs as she stares at him, processing the weight of his emotional admission.
Despite the gore of her fatal wound, she feels a strange lack of any regret. She reaches a gloved hand to his face, urging Theo to survive the coming trials.
Theo weeps openly as she insists that he must continue living regardless of the circumstances.
She tells him to live so he can eventually force their enemies to regret everything.
Her hand suddenly slips away, a quick, sharp movement sounding as her strength finally fails.
As her eyes close, Theo lets out a final, agonizing cry for his fallen captain. A blinding, warm light envelops her as her consciousness begins to slowly fade away.
She wonders if her magic is departing as she welcomes the seemingly inevitable end.
The scene shifts to a bright room where she appears as a young child.
Her father feeds her sweets, encouraging his young daughter to eat as much as she likes. Her older brother smiles warmly, showing her a collection of beautiful dresses chosen just for her.
She reflects on this ideal life, full of family and things she never hoped to have.
Young Patty beams with pure, unadulterated joy, finally feeling the warmth of a loving family.
Despite the outward affection, the young girl begins to feel a sense of overwhelming nervous tension.
A sudden wave of confusion hits her as she questions the reality of her current situation.
She realizes with a start that she is actually an adult trapped in a strange dream.
The vision shifts toward a grand white estate as the transition to another memory begins.
A grown Theo, now wearing royal regalia, leans over her and promises they will remain together.
She is stunned to realize Theo has become king and developed a deep obsession with her.
Frustration sets in as she wonders how her plan to start over has gone so wrong. Surrounded by soft pink roses, Theo asks her to become his queen and rule by his side. Theo gently kisses her hand, his intense gaze reflecting a devotion that leaves her completely speechless. Flustered and blushing, the red-haired woman demands to know what on earth Theo thinks he's doing.
A narrative panel explains that her overwhelming regeneration magic caused her to regress into a child.
She laments that her very birth was considered a crime by those who should have loved her.
The young girl gazes at her mother's portrait, knowing her birth cost that beautiful woman's life.
She solemnly reflects that she never wished to be born at the cost of her mother's existence.
Banished from the main family, she was sent to live in isolation within the cold estate annex.
A cruel maid looms over the young girl, harshly demanding that she stand up straight immediately.
A sharp stinging whack sounds as the maid strikes her, calling the terrified child a monster. She realizes the maid served her mother's family and blamed the child for the mother's death.
The maid informs the child that her father never wants to see her face ever again. Mocking the girl, the maid claims her father is indifferent to any abuse she might suffer. Desperate for salvation, the girl runs to her father, hoping he might care if she is her. Tears well in her eyes as she looks up, seeking even a shred of paternal affection.
Her father turns with a cold, piercing gaze, asking with utter disdain what she is doing.
He dismisses her without a second thought, ordering a guard to take her back to the annex. Staring at her bruises, she gives up on hope, realizing that wanting love only leads to pain. She discovers her magic can numb physical pain, helping her survive the relentless abuse she endures.
A new purpose takes hold as she learns she can join the military at 13 years old.
A single tear falls as the girl hardens her heart, preparing to leave her past behind. A sudden heavy clack sounds as the adult daughter enters her father's office for the final time.
Facing the man who neglected her, she dryly notes that it has been a long time.
Her father looks up with immediate irritation, harshly asking what his daughter could possibly want now.
She grips her suitcase handle tightly, steeling herself to say exactly what she came here for.
Standing with renewed confidence, the red-haired woman prepares to deliver her final, long-awaited Declaration of Independence. Her father mocks her, asking if she expects a party for showing up after so much time.
She curtly rejects his dismissive attitude with a single firm word of denial to his mocking question.
She informs him of her decision to join the military, much to her father's visible confusion.
She places her hand on the desk, stating that they likely will never meet again after today. Her mind flashes to her mother's image as she prepares to settle their shared painful history.
Looking exactly like the late mother, she stands defiantly against the man who failed them both. Her father is visibly shaken, gasping out the name Priscilla as he sees her mother's resemblance.
She tells him to stop playing the victim since he was the one who abandoned her.
Stunned by her bold and cutting words, her father weakly asks what she just said to him.
Patricia Alvin confronts her father, accusing him of standing by and allowing her suffering.
She smiles and asks her father if he was aware of the scripture's teachings.
A sacred text states that parents are obligated to provide love to their children.
Her father breaks into a nervous sweat and asks what she is implying.
Recalling her isolation, Patricia notes her father ignored her pain while hiding her away. A portrait reveals Patricia's mother, who perished while choosing to protect her unborn child.
Patricia informs her father that he will never reunite with her mother in the afterlife.
The father stands stunned in his office as the weight of his guilt sinks in.
A single tear falls as Patricia hardens her gaze against the father who failed her. Transitions reveal the military became a sanctuary for overlooked nobles and women in medical roles. Barrels of swords emphasize that strength was the only currency that mattered in the military.
An officer calls Patricia Alvin forward to proceed with her official military magic evaluation. Patricia Alvin confirms her presence, looking ahead with a focused and deeply determined expression.
Bystanders whisper in surprise as a child steps forward to test her magical aptitude.
Reaching for the glowing orb, Patricia observes the process through which magic is officially tested. Evaluators are shocked by her immense power and immediately assign her to the Magic Knights.
Light particles dance around her fingers as she begins to harness her newfound military potential.
Patricia admits that while military life was rigorous, she preferred the challenge to her home.
Engaging in combat drills, she finds the merit-based system far superior to her previous life.
Armed and ready, she reflects that physical training was easier than enduring her family's neglect.
Over 8 years, Patricia's skill and dedication lead her to the rank of division captain.
Captain Patricia reviews documents in her office while subordinates wait for her professional orders.
A sudden visible tremor in her hand reveals her internal shock at the new assignment.
Patricia expresses total disbelief upon learning that the third prince is being sent to her.
Her subordinates tease her about being intimidated by a prince and mention the queen's request.
Beading sweat highlights Patricia's anxiety as she processes the political implications of this royal order.
The official document bears a signature that confirms the transfer of the high-ranking royal youth. Narration introduces Theobald Christian, an illegitimate prince born to a maid who died during childbirth.
Theo spent his youth in isolation, mirroring Patricia's own experiences of having no one. Observing the similarities between their pasts, Patricia feels a deep sense of shared kinship.
Patricia questions why the document omits the specific magical attributes belonging to the young prince.
A subordinate clarifies that while Theo possesses immense magic, he lacks any ability to control it.
Patricia wonders if the court cares for his safety by sending a powerless prince to war. She steels her resolve, preparing to make a definitive choice regarding the boy's future. Captain Patricia officially announces her decision to personally take the young prince under her care. A sharp clack sounds as Patricia resolves to teach the boy how to survive.
Young Theobald stands amidst yellow flowers, looking forward with a stoic and guarded expression.
The captain approaches the silver-haired prince as other soldiers watch their first formal meeting.
Patricia introduces herself and informs the young prince that she is now his commanding officer.
Despite outranking him, Patricia reminds herself to maintain awareness of the boy's royal status.
The prince stares back at his new captain with a silent and incredibly wary gaze.
A dismissive pff sounds as Theo turns his head away, rejecting her attempt at formal introduction.
Patricia fumes with irritation while the prince maintains his arrogant and completely unimpressed demeanor.
Moving quickly, Patricia uses her gloved hands to firmly tilt the boy's face toward her.
She pulls the startled prince closer, offering a surprisingly warm and motherly smile.
Theo looks up at the captain, his face flushing as he processes her sudden affection.
Patricia's radiant smile and gentle expression begin to break through the young boy's cold exterior.
She playfully pinches the prince's cheeks, ignoring his embarrassment to establish her unique authority.
Theo's eyes widen in shock as he experiences genuine kindness from a superior for once.
The captain embraces the boy, marking the start of a loyalty that will define their futures.
Theo groans in pain on the ground while Patricia watches his painful reaction with total indifference. Clutching his face, the prince demands to know why she struck him, but she mocks his rudeness. Theo asserts his royalty, yet Patricia challenges him to complain to the king if he feels offended.
She mocks his imagined complaints, leaving the prince sweating and visibly rattled by her biting, sarcastic tone.
Patricia taunts him, stating that complaining would be pathetic and that he must obey her royal orders.
A heavy silence falls as the silver-haired prince looks down with a deeply sorrowful and dejected expression.
Studying his face, Patricia realizes his expression isn't one of anger, but of profound, crushing loneliness. Narration explains that illegitimate royals are often discarded or quietly removed from the kingdom's history without trace. She understands that Theo likely lives in constant fear, suspecting everyone of working with the queen. With nowhere else to turn, the prince remains trapped under the absolute weight of his royal command.
A sharp clack sounds as Patricia reminds him that military orders are the only law here.
Leaning in close, the captain informs him that his life and survival now depend entirely on her.
Startled and sweating, the prince finally asks her what she expects him to do for her first. Patricia cheerfully orders him to run 20 laps, ignoring his shocked protest as she smiles with glee.
A quick sta-sta sounds as she leads him out, warning that hesitation only makes military training harder.
She maintains a strict regimen, treating the prince like any other recruit regardless of his royal status.
A sharp escapes Theo as Patricia uses her magic to drag him back during their training.
She effortlessly reels the prince in with a magic lasso, wearing a bright and very satisfied smile. Deep into the night, she relentlessly commands the exhausted boy to repeat his difficult physical drills.
The sun sets over the training grounds, marking the end of another grueling and difficult military day.
Exhausted, Theo collapses onto the stone floor while his breath hitches in a tired, pained gasp.
Patricia stands over him with crossed arms, observing his limit after the day's intense and grueling workout.
Watching him closely, the captain admits to herself that the boy is tougher than she initially anticipated.
She encourages him to build stamina, though he weakly retorts that every person here is completely insane. A dull thud sounds as he falls, calling her a monster while she emphasizes his future survival.
The evening sky turns a fiery orange as the wind rustles through the leaves of the estate.
Theo lies on his back, staring blankly at the sky as he processes his harsh new reality. Patricia promises to make him strong enough that no one can ever take anything from him again. The silver-haired prince stares up at her, stunned by her unexpected words of genuine and warm encouragement.
A soft swish sounds as she extends a gloved hand to pull him up from the ground.
She urges him to make the snobs regret their cruelty as she looks down at him kindly. Grasping her hand, he asks with a flicker of hope if strength is truly possible for him. Patricia confirms his question with a radiant smile, assuring him of his future potential in the military.
She laughs while recalling how she silenced everyone who dared to mock her for being a woman.
Patricia explains that exercise clears the mind, though Theo quips about her brain becoming pure muscle instead. Patricia declares strength is power, but the sweating prince mocks her unnoble, muscle-brained attitude with total disbelief.
She smiles, mentioning her training gave her the excellent idea to ruin her family estate long ago.
Looking away, she laments not trashing her father's home before she left it for the military life. A sudden, bright laughter erupts from Theo as he finally lets his guarded walls crumble before her. Theo asks her to drop the formal titles and simply call him by his name, Theo, instead.
He resolves to do his best, addressing her respectfully as Captain Patricia under the beautiful golden sunset. Patricia praises him warmly while patting his head, leaving the prince flustered and blushing very deeply. Narration notes that despite his complaints, Theo improved his skills at an incredibly rapid and impressive pace.
He pushes through laps, sit-ups, and sword drills, proving his total dedication to becoming a true warrior.
Sparks fly as he barely manages to infuse his blade with a tiny fragment of his own magic.
Patricia observes that his raw magical potential is actually nearly as vast as her own immense power.
She suggests determining his elemental affinity, noting that magic is only one part of finding true strength.
A sharp swing sounds as the sword glints, catching the light during their intense afternoon sparring session. The prince stands ready, facing his captain with a focused and much more confident combat stance. With a determined shout, Theo lunges forward, fully committed to proving his worth through his sword training.
Patricia accepts Theo's challenge with a confident grin, telling the prince to bring it on.
A sharp whoosh sounds as Theo lunges forward while Patricia effortlessly parries his aggressive sword strike.
Observing the young man's persistence, the captain compares his stubborn and honest nature to a younger brother.
She reflects that he relentlessly challenges her even though he has never once won their matches.
Ending the session, Patricia bids him farewell while the exhausted prince thanks her for the training match.
A fellow soldier questions the prince's willingness to follow orders from a female commanding officer like her.
Theo ignores the soldier's sexism, wondering aloud if he will ever truly be able to defeat Patricia.
The knight nervously suggests a duel to resolve the tension, but the prince wisely declines the offer.
Internally, Theo acknowledges Patricia's immense strength and kindness, noting she completely deserves her high military rank.
Staring at the sky, the prince realizes he has no complaints regarding the captain's strict leadership.
Patricia watches him from the shadows, affectionately thinking the boy is getting far too cheeky lately.
Over shared meals, their bond deepens as Patricia begins to view the young prince as her family.
A sudden shattering effect marks the end of their happiness as a dark day finally arrives.
An officer delivers a formal command addressing Captain Patricia Alvin with urgent and extremely grave news. Patricia stands in total shock upon reading the royal order to deploy to the front lines.
A single bead of sweat rolls down her face as the weight of the assignment sinks in.
The captain's internal thoughts spiral in panic as she questions the nature of this impossible new mission. The official document is revealed, bearing the royal seal that mandates an immediate and dangerous deployment.
The messenger reiterates that the king has ordered her specific squad to the dangerous front lines.
Patricia's eye twitches in disbelief as she processes the suicidal nature of the upcoming military operation.
The officer tells the captain she should feel honored by this direct order from the king. A tactical map illustrates rising tensions at the border with the neighboring kingdom of Elysia. The command explicitly orders the knights to cross the border and initiate a first strike attack.
Patricia realizes this reckless mission is nothing more than a death sentence for her entire squad.
She gathers her knights, who are mostly noble sons never expected to see actual combat. The captain explains they are to wipe out border troops and push deep into enemy territory. A distressed knight shouts in protest, demanding to know why their specific squad was chosen.
Patricia grit her teeth in frustration, stating they must obey the king's command regardless of their feelings.
She announces their departure in 3 days, ordering absolute secrecy regarding the details of the mission.
Patricia encourages her men to use their remaining time to visit their loved ones and families.
As the knights lament their fate, the captain reflects on having no one to say goodbye to.
Theo looks down with a somber expression, mirroring the heavy atmosphere permeating the training grounds.
The moon shines brightly over the silent estate, signaling the arrival of a tense and final night. Sitting alone, the captain contemplates the loneliness of her life before the upcoming deployment. She laments the emptiness of her world, having neither friends nor family outside of the military.
Theo suddenly calls out to her, startling the captain from her dark and solitary thoughts.
The silver-haired prince stands before Patricia amongst glowing blue flowers with a look of deep concern. Patricia looks up at the young man, asking what is troubling him on this quiet night.
Theo joins her on the bench, asking if they can speak privately about the recent orders.
A soft creak sounds as the prince clenches his gloved hands together in a display of anxiety.
He looks directly at her, asking if this deployment is a result of his royal presence. Patricia hesitates, knowing the truth would crush him, while her heart aches with silent guilt. The prince asks if they are being sent out with the explicit intent of being held.
Narration confirms the queen is plotting to eliminate Theo now that his magical power has grown. The court intends to use the prince's death in battle to justify a full-scale war.
A soft tap sounds as Patricia places a comforting hand on Theo to steady his nerves.
She vows that they will survive this trial together, offering him a rare moment of vulnerability.
The captain promises to outlive every single person who tried to discard them like trash.
Theo absorbs her words, a new and dangerous resolve beginning to take shape in his eyes. The prince declares that outliving his enemies will make him king, leaving Patricia stunned by his ambition. Patricia laughs heartily, telling Theo she wouldn't mind seeing him become the king one day.
Sitting together, Patricia muses that someone like Theo who has known suffering would make a good king.
A foreboding text on a dark background warns that things in life never go that smoothly.
A sudden, sharp sound signals the start of the disaster as the scene shifts to the battlefield.
Patricia leads her dwindling troops across the border, but they are quickly overwhelmed and nearly wiped out.
The battlefield is a chaotic nightmare of flying projectiles and falling soldiers as the massacre begins.
Realizing the trap is sprung, Patricia watches in horror as her men perish amidst desperate cries of distress.
Patricia orders a retreat to save the survivors, but a cold command from above forbids them from leaving. The ruthless order mandates that every soldier must fight until they are dead, leaving no one alive.
A grim realization washes over Patricia that they were never meant to be anything but disposable pawns.
Vowing to take responsibility, the captain orders her remaining men to retreat while she prepares her magic.
Patricia is baffled to see a wind bullet magic spell coming from the direction of their own allies.
Her heart sinks as she realizes the lethal magic isn't a misfire, but is aimed directly at Theo.
Theo's world freezes as he understands the Queen planned this deployment specifically to ensure his certain death.
With a quick burst of speed, Patricia launches herself toward the prince to protect him from the strike.
She flies through the air, desperately praying she can reach the silver-haired boy before the magic hits.
Pushing him aside with all her strength, Patricia intercepts the deadly attack intended for the young prince.
A sharp escapes her as the wind bullet strikes her body, drawing blood in a spray.
Theo cries out for his captain as he watches her collapse onto the dusty ground of the battlefield.
Rushing to her side, the devastated prince catches the falling woman before she hits the hard roof.
Theo's eyes widen in absolute despair as he gazes down at his severely wounded and bleeding commanding officer.
Sobbing, the prince begs Patricia not to die, pleading with her to stay with him through the carnage.
Tears stream down Theo's face as he holds her close, completely shattered by the sacrifice she just made.
Patricia looks up at him with fading eyes, blood staining her lips as her life force begins to ebb. She urges him to live and one day make their enemies regret every cruelty they have ever committed.
A guttural scream of "Captain!" erupts from Theo as he refuses to accept the inevitable end of his mentor.
In her final conscious moments, Patricia's only wish is for her dear subordinate to survive this nightmare.
Her gloved hand slips and falls, signaling her loss of consciousness as the light fades from the scene.
Theo kneels over her body amidst the smoke and ruins of the battlefield, a lone figure in mourning.
Grief-stricken, the prince stares blankly ahead as he processes the weight of the captain's final sacrifice.
Gently touching her face, Theo whispers that it is okay now, a strange calm settling over his features.
With a blood-streaked face and eyes full of new purpose, the prince resolves to think of a solution. Theo places his hand over Patricia, and a brilliant golden light begins to emanate from his glowing fingertips. An internal vision reveals the prince's hidden truth. He possesses the rare and powerful ability to use healing magic. He reflects that healing is seen as a sign of weakness among royals, necessitating his life of secrecy. Determined to save her, Theo declares that he can perform this miracle despite the potential risks to himself.
He resolves to pour every bit of his stored magical energy into a single life-saving healing spell for her.
The area is flooded with light as Theo casts the spell, willing to risk his life for her survival.
The miracle occurs as Patricia is surrounded by glowing white flowers, her wounds slowly beginning to mend.
Later, a search party of cleanup soldiers arrives at the site to survey the aftermath of the slaughter.
An officer surveys the gruesome scene, muttering about the mess left behind by the reckless border invasion.
He laments the waste of the Magic Knights' lives, assuming the third prince has perished in the chaos.
The soldiers whisper about the queen's boundless cruelty and how the king has become nothing but her puppet.
A sudden shout rings out as a soldier discovers a survivor among the bodies, shocking the commanding officer.
A bloodied but alive Theo is supported by a soldier, his head bowed in exhaustion and lingering grief.
The officer stands in total disbelief upon realizing that the third prince has actually managed to survive. His eyes widen in shock as he processes the political implications of the prince's unexpected and miraculous return. Patricia lies in a field of flowers, appearing as if she is a dreaming child in a peaceful vision.
Her eye flutters and slowly begins to open as the effects of the healing magic take full hold.
A soft "oh" sounds as Patricia wakes up under a bright chandelier, returning to the world of the living.
Two children with brown hair gasp in surprise as they celebrate that Patricia is finally awake.
The brown-haired boy shouts that he will get the director while Patricia sits up in bed.
Two small children lean over the bed asking Patricia if she is okay or feeling any hurt.
Patricia is horrified to realize her voice is impossibly high-pitched and her hands are impossibly small and dainty.
Gazing into a mirror, she sees the reflection of a much younger version of her red-haired self.
Shimmering white flowers bloom around the edges of the frame as she processes her bizarre, youthful transformation.
Panic seizes Patricia as she holds the mirror, wondering how she has become younger and what happened.
A nun enters the room and expresses relief that the red-haired girl has finally regained her consciousness.
The nun explains that they were extremely worried because she had been sleeping for 3 days straight.
Patricia asks the nun where she is while a small child clings to the woman's gray robes.
A text bubble explains that the army found Patricia collapsed near the border and brought her here.
Patricia looks down with a grim expression, her mind racing with the memories of her previous life.
She recalls her death on the battlefield as a decorated captain, questioning why she is now alive.
A sharp focus on her eye reveals the deep psychological shock of remembering her own fatal wound. She vividly remembers Theo crying over her body, wondering if the silver-haired prince managed to survive the massacre.
Her small hands tremble and clench the mirror as she reflects on the chaos of her final moments.
The nun sits by the bed and asks Patricia if she has any family to return to.
Patricia looks away sadly, thinking of her distant father and brother before telling the nun she has no one.
The nun looks at the red-haired girl with deep sympathy, remarking that she has clearly been through much.
A soft touch from the nun startles Patricia as the woman gently places a hand on her head. Patricia's blue eyes fill with tears as she experiences a level of kindness she hasn't felt in years.
Wiping her face, Patricia listens as the nun asks for her name to complete their official intake records.
She realizes that her survival as a high-ranking officer might cause political problems for the military or country.
Deciding to hide her true identity, she softly tells the nun that her name is simply Patty.
Patty sits among white flowers, embracing her new life as a child while keeping her past secrets hidden. She urgently asks the nun about the current status of the war and the fate of the borer.
The nun reassures Patty that children shouldn't worry about such things and that she is perfectly safe now.
Narration explains that Patricia was officially taken in by the convent's orphanage following her recovery from the battlefield. Despite having the appearance of a 7-year-old, the 24-year-old Patricia begins helping the nuns care for younger children.
A single piece of bread sits on a plate, illustrating the poverty that has worsened since the war.
Patricia eats a meager meal with the other orphans, her heart aching as the children complain of hunger. A narration bubble notes that they were actually considered lucky just to have a place in this orphanage.
Patty and another girl with brown braids work together to wash dishes in the orphanage's stone kitchen.
Looking at her companion, Patty thinks that hearing about war from children proves the country is in crisis.
A somber view of the streets shows children who didn't make it to safety, succumbing to war and poverty.
A gold frame surrounds the bright sky as news arrives that the war has finally reached a ceasefire. The nun hugs Patty tightly, telling her there is nothing left to fear now that the fighting stopped.
Patty walks through the hall with a baby on her back, noticing that more orphans keep arriving daily.
Seeing the overflowing building, she worries that the orphanage is at its limit and won't last much longer.
A carriage pulls up to the orphanage estate, signaling the arrival of an unexpected and wealthy-looking visitor.
Two children run to Patty, excitedly telling her that the director has a visitor at the front gates. Patricia's eyes widen as the boy adds that the man looked incredibly rich and arrived in style.
The brown-haired girl happily hopes that the rich visitor is here to give a much-needed donation to them.
Patty walks with her friends toward the main entrance, carrying laundry baskets as they go to see the guest. She stops in her tracks as she spots a man from behind, a sense of dread filling her. Patricia's face pales in sheer terror as she recognizes the person standing before the orphanage's head nun.
A tall man with long red hair tied back speaks with the nun, and Patty identifies him as her father.
The red-haired man looks toward the children, his face showing the signs of age and the weight of nobility.
He asks the director about the child watching them, and she identifies Patty as a recent war orphan. Clinging to the baby in her arms, Patricia panics, wondering what she should do now that her father is here.
The nun asks Patty to come over while Count Alvin watches her with a somber expression.
Patty stares with wide, sweating eyes as she internally rejects the idea of associating with the nobleman.
After the nun reminds Patty not to be rude, the young girl responds with a frustrated grunt.
Patty realizes the Count won't recognize her since he never truly looked at her in the past.
The small red-haired girl stands defiantly before the tall nobleman and the watchful head nun.
Count Alvin stares intensely at the child, his pained expression making Patty feel deeply uncomfortable.
Shocked by his unwavering attention, Patty wonders if he sees her as a ghost from his past. A sudden flinch escapes Patty as the nobleman reaches his hand toward the young girl's head.
Count Alvin stands in stunned silence, his hand hovering midair as he observes the child's terror. Clenching his fist, the nobleman calls for the director's attention with a sudden and forceful tone.
Count Alvin stuns everyone by formally declaring his intention to adopt the red-haired girl immediately. The nun suggests the Count take his time, pointing out that many younger children are available.
Disbelieving, Patty questions why her father is suddenly appearing to take her back after all this time.
Patty looks up at the Count and bluntly tells him to pick any other orphan instead. The girl reflects that while noble adoption is usually fortunate, returning to that house is unthinkable.
Count Alvin promises to ensure the orphanage is properly funded if his request for adoption is granted.
The shocking offer of wealth and stability leaves both the nun and Patty in utter disbelief. Patty remains frozen in shock while the nun calls out to her in a concerned tone. A dark shadow falls over Patty's face as she contemplates the heavy price of her decision.
Viewing the dilapidated ceiling and spiderwebs, Patty acknowledges that the orphanage has reached its absolute limit.
Patty demands to know if the Count will truly ensure the other children can eat properly.
The Count agrees, stating he will personally track the funds to guarantee the children's welfare.
Resigning herself to the deal, Patty clenches her dress and provides her formal understanding.
Surrounded by white flowers, Patty declares her decision to leave the orphanage and follow the nobleman.
She reasons that she cannot risk the lives of the other orphans over a personal grudge.
The adoption is quickly finalized, and Patty prepares to leave the orphanage in a grand carriage.
A dainty shoe steps onto the stone path as Patty arrives at her former family estate.
Narration notes that she has returned to the very estate she once swore to never enter again.
Patty's attention is captured by a sudden, soft sound as she enters the familiar mansion.
Count Alvin stands before her, his tall figure silhouetted against the bright afternoon sky.
As he touches her hair, Patty suspects he chose her simply to satisfy a cruel whim.
Patty's hand begins to glow with a faint magical light as she prepares to defend herself. She internally vows to use her magic and flee if the nobleman attempts to harm her. The world stops as Count Alvin pulls Patty into a sudden, tight, and unexpected embrace.
Wide-eyed and breathless, the red-haired girl can only mutter a confused sound in response.
To Patty's absolute shock, the nobleman begins to sob, his cries sounding throughout the courtyard. Patty notes that this man never once hugged her during her previous life as his daughter. A wide view of the grand mansion highlights the start of Patty's new and surprising life.
A vision of a silver-haired man in royal robes suggests that Theo's journey is just beginning. Patty's face pales with shock as she continues to process the strange events of the day. She is horrified to see a large portrait of her previous self in military uniform hanging. Count Alvin admires the portrait of his late family, while Patty internally mocks his apparent grief.
Clenching her fist, Patty dismisses the nobleman's mourning as a pathetic and hypocritical act. Patty asks if she was adopted for her looks, assuming it's a story for high society.
Looking pained, the Count admits he couldn't leave her in poverty because of her striking resemblance.
Patty finds his reasoning absurd, remembering how truly miserable she was in this very house.
A gentle pat on the head catches Patty off guard as the nobleman touches her hair.
Patty looks up in silence as Count Alvin gazes down at her with a tender expression.
The Count promises to make the rest of her life happy, shocking Patty with his kindness.
Taking her hand, he invites her to eat while Patty wonders why he can love her now.
A heavy sense of frustration hangs in the air as Patty reflects on her situation. The scene shifts to an extravagant feast illuminated by a grand, sparkling crystal chandelier. Patty sits before a table overflowing with gourmet dishes, looking overwhelmed by the sudden abundance.
Count Alvin smiles warmly at the girl, encouraging her to eat as much as she desires.
Patty notes that the massive feast is a startling contrast to the tiny portions at the orphanage. A sudden loud bam echoes through the dining hall as the doors are thrown open.
A tall, intense young man with messy red hair and sharp green eyes enters the room.
Patty's heart skips a beat as she instantly recognizes the man as her brother, David. Pointing toward the table, David demands to know the identity of the child sitting with them. The Count introduces Patty as his stepsister while she internally reflects on their long, complicated history.
Count Alvin places a reassuring hand on David's shoulder as the young man processes the news.
David stares at Patty with a grim, unreadable expression, his sharp eyes narrowed in deep thought.
Patty worries that her sudden arrival is a burden and that David wasn't told about her. The atmosphere remains tense as the red-haired young man slowly approaches the small, nervous girl.
David's expression softens into a gentle smile as he introduces himself and welcomes Patty home.
Patty stands and bows politely, promising to be on her best behavior to avoid causing trouble.
Reaching out, David tells her to stop being formal and just enjoy being a child.
Patty sits back down in silence, deeply confused by the unexpected kindness of her former family. The scene transitions to a room filled with gifts as someone admires a new outfit. Patty stands amidst blooming flowers, dressed in an elegant orange gown with intricate white lace ruffles. David holds up a pale yellow dress, suggesting that softer colors might suit Patty even better.
Surveying the mountain of gifts and dresses, Patty begins to express her overwhelming gratitude to them.
Chibi versions of her family insist she shouldn't be shy as Patty feels like a lady.
Looking thoroughly exhausted, Patty sighs with relief now that the long dress-fitting session has finally ended.
A close-up of Patty's blue eye signals a shift into her observations of the household.
Patty notices that the atmosphere of the mansion has changed entirely under the new staff.
She recalls the cruel head maid and the butler who once treated her with utter contempt.
In contrast, the new maids are cheerful and treat the young girl with genuine care and respect.
A kind servant gently tucks a fresh white rose into Patty's long, vibrant red hair. During a quiet dinner, Patty observes that the men actually value her presence and her words.
David sips his tea while listening intently as Patty prepares to address him with a request.
Nervous but determined, Patty tentatively calls out to David, referring to him as her big brother. Count Alvin reacts with visible shock and emotion upon hearing the young girl use the term.
A collection of thoughtful gifts, including a plush teddy bear and fine jewelry, litters the room.
Narration notes that they even hired a private tutor to ensure Patty receives a proper education. David, the Count, and the headmaid all gaze at Patty with adoration and sparkling eyes. Surrounded by a golden frame, Patty feels she is finally living the dream she once wanted.
Dressed in equestrian gear, Patty walks through the manicured mansion gardens on a bright, sunny day.
The door gives a quiet gotcha as Patty peeks inside, asking if her father is looking at portraits.
Count Alvin confirms her suspicion as David stands beside him in the quiet, grand portrait hall.
Patty hides behind a large stone pillar, watching as the men study a painting of her past.
David asks the Count if Patty could truly be biological family, given her resemblance to Patricia.
Looking pained, the Count declares that his love for his late wife was absolute and exclusive.
Listening from her hiding spot, Patty breaks into a cold sweat as the conversation continues.
Count Alvin wonders aloud if God sent the girl to help them atone for their past sins. Patty stares at the portrait of her mother, questioning if her family deserves a second chance.
The Count confesses that he ignored Patricia's suffering because she was a constant reminder of her mother.
David looks down in shame as the Count admits that Patricia was innocent and he was foolish.
Tears well in the Count's eyes as he regrets never asking Patricia about the servant's hidden cruelty. Patty is frozen in shock, realizing for the first time that her father never ordered her mistreatment. Narrative text reflects on how the servant's cruelty was revealed once she left the house. Count Alvin and the red-haired young man look on solemnly as a maid leaves in tears.
The young red-haired girl looks up with a wide-eyed expression of shock and realization.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick welling sounding as tears fill her eyes.
Patty dreams of a peaceful life without swords, magic, or the horrors of war.
A narrative block explains that Patty finally began living as a proper noble daughter.
While being loved and educated, Patty continues to secretively train her immense magical powers.
The family travels to the capital after being summoned by the ruthless new king.
The red-haired young man notes that the people prefer the new king's active political engagement.
Count Alvin promises to take Patty for a walk during her first capital visit. Patty gazes out the window, apprehensive about the summons from the cold-hearted new king.
Theo appears in a vision as Patty hopes to learn something about his past.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick squeeze sounding as Patty clenches her fists.
Patty's eyes fill with determination as she silently prays for Theo to be alive.
The grand royal palace gate stands as a silent sentinel before the imposing white structure.
Count Alvin, the red-haired young man, and Patty bow deeply before the king's throne.
An authoritative voice commands them to raise their heads while the two men look nervous.
Patty slowly lifts her gaze, her face set in a look of intense, quiet focus.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick gust sounding as she spots the king. Patty screams internally, shocked to see Theo sitting on the throne in full royal regalia.
The silver-haired king sits with a hand to his chin, radiating an aura of power. Theo looks down from his throne, surrounded by blooming roses and a golden, ethereal light.
Patty nearly shouts Theo's name aloud before catching herself at the very last second. Realizing she's just a child, Patty fears execution if she addresses him so casually.
A faint blush creeps onto Patty's face as she processes the sight of the king. Patty's eye twitches as she acknowledges that her old subordinate is now the new king.
Count Alvin warns that the king is a merciless man to those without absolute loyalty. Narrative text recounts how the king murdered his father and siblings to secure the throne.
In a memory, young Theo claims he will become king if he outlives everyone else.
Patricia laughs, telling Theo she wouldn't mind seeing him take the crown one day. Patricia's hand rests on Theo's silver hair as he looks at her with fond admiration.
Patty wonders if her careless words in the past pushed Theo onto this blood-stained path.
Count Alvin offers his deepest congratulations to the silver-haired king on his recent coronation.
Theo acknowledges the Count and remarks that the late Captain Patricia had helped him significantly.
A chibi memory shows Patricia kicking Theo while a text bubble notes no details are needed.
Count Alvin trembles as he realizes the king knows the truth about his late daughter.
The silver-haired king watches the small red-haired girl stand silently in the grand throne room.
Theo's regal profile is framed by soft pink flowers as he maintains a stoic expression.
The silver-haired king stares ahead with intense, red glowing eyes and a calm, commanding presence.
A high-angle view shows Theo seated on his throne looking down at the small girl.
Patty panics internally, wondering if Theo has somehow managed to see through her current form.
Her attention is taken by a sudden quick slide sounding as Theo shifts on his throne.
The king and his subordinates stand together in the grand, high-ceilinged royal throne room.
Patty cowers as Theo takes on the appearance of a terrifying wolf in her mind.
Theo asks Alvin if Patricia was his only daughter, causing the man to flinch visibly.
Alvin nervously explains that Patty is an orphan who reminded him too much of Patricia.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick eek sounding as Patty realizes her precarious situation. Patty feels a mixture of relief and frustration as she observes the cold new king. Theo leans in and directly asks the red-haired girl for her name and her age.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick thud sounding as Patty clenches her fists tightly. Patty radiates elegance in her dark floral gown as she envisions herself a proper lady. A sudden and heavy silence falls over the dining hall as a royal presence enters. Patty mentions becoming a bride while the silver-haired King Theo walks away, leaving her worried. The intricate embroidery of the royal cloak glistens as the king maintains his imposing posture. A blood-stained crown and scepter tell the grim tale of Theo's violent ascent to power. King Theo approaches with a crushing aura that makes the nobleman bow in absolute fear.
Patty remains unfazed by the king's terrifying reputation because she remembers the boy he once was.
Looking down at the red-haired girl, King Theo notes that her young age is no obstacle.
To everyone's surprise, the king commands that Patty serve as a lady-in-waiting at the palace.
Count Alvin desperately pleads with the king, arguing that Patty is still just a young child.
The king mockingly reminds the count that Patricia joined the military even earlier than this girl.
Theo highlights the count's hypocrisy for sending his biological daughter to war while protecting his adopted one.
A cold, magical pressure fills the room as King Theo finds the nobleman's sudden hesitation strange.
Shadows of guilt and despair loom over Count Alvin and David as they process the king's words.
Looking at the king, Patty realizes she is being used as a test of her family's loyalty.
She recalls how Theo once grew furious when she spoke of the Alvin family's past cruelty.
The young girl flinches when King Theo uses her new name to address her directly. Theo explains that her royal service is simply meant to teach her manners and prepare for marriage. Patty realizes she is a royal hostage, trapped between the king and her new family's safety.
Fearing the king's retaliation, Patty decides she cannot refuse the order or push back anymore.
Though she once hated them, Patty realizes she never truly wanted her family to suffer.
She cherishes the brief, warm memories of being loved by her father and brother at dinner. A look of grim determination crosses Patty's face as she prepares for the trials ahead.
A tiny version of the girl waves goodbye to her short-lived life of noble peace.
The scene shifts to the massive and ornate white marble pillars of the royal palace.
A steady rhythm of footsteps echoes as Patty prepares to begin her most difficult royal task. Dressed in a simple maid's uniform, Patty stands nervously before the grand, towering royal doors.
Clutching a silver water basin, Patty feels the weight of her new responsibilities as a servant.
Narration explains that every other lady-in-waiting refused this specific duty out of sheer terror.
A sudden, loud bang echoes through the hallway as the heavy chamber doors are thrown open.
Patty notes the incredible privilege of being allowed to enter the king's private bedroom without permission.
Pulling back the heavy curtains, Patty cheerfully wakes the king and greets the bright morning sun.
King Theo groans and shields his eyes from the light, looking tired and disheveled in bed. Because others were too afraid to wake him, royal affairs were often delayed before Patty's arrival. A tiny Patty hilariously yanks the blankets away, tumbling the sleepy king right onto the floor. Rubbing his tired eyes, King Theo sighs and remarks on the young girl's relentless energy. Patty proudly declares that she has always been an early riser as she prepares the water.
A playful chibi Patty struggles to keep the nodding king awake while he tries to sleep.
Theo reaches out and notes with amusement that Patty is truly the only one not afraid.
The girl smiles softly, hiding her surprise as the king leans closer to observe her face. The king's hands gently clasp Patty's, noticing the rough and chopped skin on her small fingers.
A warm golden light begins to glow as the king uses his magic on the girl's hands.
Patty stares in shock as the magical warmth instantly heals the damaged skin on her fingers.
Watching him, the girl wonders if Theo has been specializing in healing magic this entire time.
Narration notes that Theo faced immense contempt as a prince for lacking any offensive magical talent. Seeking power, Theo realized he could weaponize his healing magic to manipulate and destroy human bodies.
Trapped in a world of mirrors, a young Theo once despaired over his perceived magical weakness.
The king's red eyes glint as he recalls learning to stop a human heart with magic.
King Theo gazes at Patty with a gentle smile that contradicts his reputation as a monster.
Patty reflects that despite his frightening power, Theo is a kind man who values true reason.
Patty approaches Theo casually, leading the palace staff to assign her his personal care.
Patty panics as her easy job turns into a mountain of work related to him.
A man in a purple coat startles Patty by thanking her for looking after Theo.
The man is identified as Roland, the king's close aide and very trusted companion. Roland offers to help carry the heavy basin, but Patty politely declines the gesture.
Patty reflects on how working here is easier than pretending to be a younger child.
Roland wipes away a theatrical tear while Patty watches him with a calm expression.
The scene transitions to the grand white facade of the palace under the sun.
Patty and the head court lady stand together, ready to see her living quarters.
Shocked, Patty stares at the luxurious flower-decorated canopy bed in her new palace room. Confused by the opulence, Patty asks the woman if she has entered the wrong room. The head court lady confirms the room is correct, as Patty is the exclusive lady-in-waiting.
Patty's face turns pale as she processes the magnitude of her new, high-ranking position.
While unpacking, Patty worries about the massive responsibility given to a brand new palace recruit.
A soft ka-cha sounds as Patty peeks into a closet filled with many elegant dresses.
Patty gasps in disbelief while surveying the shimmering collection of fine, high-quality outfits.
Rows of elegant gowns fill the walk-in closet, ready for Patty to wear every day. The head court lady reveals that King Theo himself ordered the special outfits for her. Patty privately wonders if this lavish treatment is more suited for a royal mistress.
Patty looks back at the head court lady, still reeling from the confusingly lavish treatment. To avoid gossip, Patty begs the woman to call her by her name without honorifics.
The head court lady smiles warmly and asks Patty to choose a dress to wear.
Patty looks breathtaking as she models a light blue gown adorned with lace and ribbons.
Admiring the dress, Patty notes its beauty while the head court lady watches with approval.
A close-up reveals Patty's suspicion about why a simple lady-in-waiting needs such luxury. After knocking on the grand office doors, the head court lady leads Patty inside.
Patty bows deeply before the king as she enters the room, clutching her dress hem.
A close-up of Patty's blue eyes highlights her shock as she is told to look up.
King Theo and Roland sit at a grand desk, welcoming Patty to the royal office.
Theo officially welcomes Lady Alvin to her new role as part of his inner circle.
Patty's eyes sparkle as she takes in the magnificence of the king's private workplace. Theo explains that starting today, Patty will assist both him and Roland with his duties.
Roland smiles, delighted to have a new coworker to help manage the heavy palace workload. A heavy thud sounds as Roland drops a massive stack of paperwork onto the desk.
Patty freezes in horror, questioning the sanity of asking a 12-year-old to do paperwork.
Theo formally repeats that this is Patty's new workplace and she must assist him daily.
Patty protests that she is too young and has never done any paperwork before now.
Theo carries a heavy stack while Patty collapses onto the desk in a comical daze. Roland looks at Patty with shock and admiration, impressed by her bluntness toward the king.
Theo tells Roland to stay quiet as the aide teases him about everyone having lookalikes.
Roland officially introduces himself to the young girl, offering a warm and polite greeting.
Patty recognizes Roland's noble lineage, asking if he hails from the prestigious Alvarez Marquis family. Roland dismisses his high rank, explaining he is only the third son and prefers casualness.
Roland asks to use her name while suggesting she should just call him Roland too. Chibi Patty happily agrees to the arrangement, thanking Lord Roland for his kindness and approachability.
A sudden, sharp sound makes Patty flinch as she senses a dark, heavy energy nearby. From his desk, Theo watches the pair interact with an intense and unreadable expression.
Roland laughs, telling the king he could have just asked to use her name too. Theo looks away with a slight blush, surrounded by roses as he processes Roland's teasing.
Patty smiles kindly and gives the king permission to address her by her name too.
Theo asks if she is certain of her choice, and Patty confirms her resolve.
Surrounded by soft pink blossoms, King Theo looks away and gently calls her name.
The red-haired girl smiles warmly and acknowledges the king with a respectful title.
A close-up reveals a faint, embarrassed blush spreading across the silver-haired man's ear.
Roland watches the exchange from a distance and quietly notes his understanding of the situation.
Roland announces that he will personally give Patty a tour of the palace as her senior. With a cheerful grin, the brown-haired man towers over a bewildered and confused Patty.
King Theo stares in absolute shock and annoyance as his aide interrupts the intimate moment.
Roland tells Theo to finish his work while dismissing the head lady in waiting for the tour.
Patty wonders if leaving the king alone with his massive workload is truly a good idea.
Theo groans in despair, surrounded by an oppressive gloom and towering stacks of paperwork.
The aide and the young girl walk together through the palace's grand white stone hallways. Roland identifies the small assembly hall, explaining its specific use for more intimate royal meetings.
The man describes the Grand Assembly Hall as the primary venue for meetings with officials.
Chibi Patty becomes dizzy and overwhelmed trying to memorize the layout of the massive royal palace.
Roland leads the girl into a sun-drenched terrace garden overflowing with vibrant red rose bushes.
The girl's blue eyes sparkle with pure delight as she marvels at the garden's immense beauty.
Roland asks if she enjoys the view while the chibi girl nods her head with enthusiasm.
The aide asks Patty if she understands why she was specifically chosen as the king's maid.
Roland leans in and reveals that the king once had a secret first love long ago.
Patty repeats the phrase in surprise, questioning the idea of the cold king having a romance.
The girl feels a strange, lonely pang in her heart, assuming Theo shared everything with her.
Roland identifies the first love as Lady Patricia Alvin, visually depicted as a powerful military officer.
A comical Chibi Patty is struck by absolute shock as she processes the man's wild claim.
Roland explains that Patricia was the king's military superior who looked after him during the war. The man notes that Patty is the spitting image of her sister, making the girl sweat.
Above a cluster of roses, Roland mentions that Patricia's body was never found after her rescue.
A sharp close-up on the girl's eyes shows her processing the dark history of her former life.
A man in a dark military uniform leads the Frontier Marquis army through a misty battlefield.
Patty deduces that the Marquis rescued Theo but abandoned her at an orphanage during the chaos.
Thought bubbles explain the Marquis' hatred for the former queen and his plan to crown Theo.
High above the throne, text explains that Theo successfully usurped the kingdom only 6 months ago.
Looking away, Patty reflects on the cruel twist of fate that brought her back here today.
Roland confirms the history while the girl listens with a solemn and deeply focused expression.
The brown-haired man asks if she finds the tale of the king's lost love somewhat tragic.
Roland suggests the count adopted her just to play dolls with a girl resembling his daughter.
The aide claims the king only wants her because she looks like his former military superior.
Floating text repeats the claim that her resemblance to his first love is the only reason.
Rowling calls the king's obsession bad taste while Patty looks on with a troubled, nervous face.
A sudden, sharp sound echoes as the girl's choker feels uncomfortably tight around her small neck.
The red-haired girl looks up and addresses the king's close aide by his formal noble title.
Patty stands tall and elegant in her blue dress, looking ready to face the man's interrogation. Patty realizes Roland feels threatened by her and decides to ignore his talk of first loves.
She thinks of herself as a mere stand-in while remembering that her true lineage remains hidden.
Patty reassures the aide that she only came to work and has no royal marriage ambitions. The girl boldly tells Roland to complain to the king if he has issues with him.
Roland stares back in surprised silence before letting out a soft, amused laugh at her bluntness.
Speech bubbles show Roland apologizing for his mean comments and asking the girl not to be angry. Chibi Roland pleads for forgiveness while Patty notes that his apology doesn't sound very sincere.
Patty promises to do her absolute best to serve and assist the king in her role.
The aide smiles warmly at the girl while expressing his trust and reliance on her.
Roland finishes the tour, advising her to seek help from the head lady if needed.
Patty watches them leave, wondering if the palace staff is genuinely worried about her.
A shimmering vision depicts a tall, silver-haired king dancing with an elegant, red-haired woman.
Amidst falling blossoms, the red-haired girl questions if the aide is merely jumping to conclusions.
Patty asks the head lady if she truly resembles the king's long-lost first love. The gray-haired woman confirms that the resemblance is common knowledge among the palace staff. Shocked, Patty wonders if they believe the king intends to eventually make her his queen.
The red-haired girl trembles, finding the idea of being raised to become a wife insane. Her blue eyes widen in a sudden moment of profound and startling internal realization.
Patty considers if this treatment is a strategy to soften the king's cold public image.
A symbolic illustration frames the king's tragic romance as a potentially perfect strategy for popularity.
A text box announces the passage of several weeks over the Grand Palace's facade.
The head lady-in-waiting requests that Patty deliver an important document directly to His Majesty. A cheerful maid asks the young girl if she would mind serving the king's tea. Palace servants approach with bright expressions, carrying various items and tasks for the young girl.
Dressed in a formal maid uniform, the red-haired girl politely accepts her many assigned duties.
Patty pushes a tea cart through the halls, noting how everyone delegates the king's tasks.
The girl observes that the aide has stopped trying to restrain her palace activities lately. Roland is delighted by the king's newfound calmness, while a chibi Patty senses his craftiness.
Pushing her cart, the girl reflects on her lack of romantic experience at 12 years old. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick click sounding as Patty peeks inside to remind Theo to rest.
Under the warm candlelight, the silver-haired king remains focused on a document at his desk.
Theo promises to sleep soon, though Patty points out he said the same earlier tonight.
Serving tea, the girl warns that chronic sleep deprivation will eventually shorten his lifespan.
Theo explains that his magic constantly heals his body, preventing any harm from lack of sleep.
Patty calls his ability convenient, but notes fatigue is a separate issue from physical healing.
The king laughs softly, finding it amusing to be called convenient for the first time. Chibi Theo tells children to prioritize sleep, while Chibi Patty sheepishly agrees to head home. A flashback shows a younger Theo excitedly asking his captain to spar with him again. The boy holds a delicate lace handkerchief, intending to give it to his military superior.
Young Theo admires the gift on the captain, but the scene turns to sudden, desperate tragedy.
In a heart-wrenching memory, the young man weeps over the captain's body, confessing his love.
Back in the present, a chibi Patty sweats profusely as she processes the heavy revelation. The king notices her distracted expression and gently calls out to her to get her attention.
Patty's heart races as she finally understands that the king's past feelings were truly love.
Surrounded by roses, Theo confirms the nature of his deep and lasting feelings of love. The red-haired girl blushes intensely, her mind reeling from the weight of the king's confession.
Theo looks at her with a gentle gaze, repeating that it was indeed an act of love.
A sudden, loud heart thud echoes as the girl stares back at the king in shock.
The silver-haired man looks away, his expression turning somber as he reflects on his past.
Looking down with a faint smile, the king begins a confession about his own self-perception.
Theo describes himself as a hopeless man who survived by sacrificing the woman he loved.
Clutching his head, the king laments his failure to cast a regeneration spell at the end.
Patty's blue eyes widen as she realizes the king actually attempted to save her with magic. A chibi Patty panics internally, wishing she could tell him that she actually survived the ordeal.
The king remains hunched over his desk, still haunted by the guilt of his perceived failure.
Patty deduces that the king's immense magic and body compatibility accidentally rejuvenated her into a child. Watching him, Patty realizes she cannot reveal her true identity as the captain he once loved.
A younger Patty's dream of being a bride makes the current girl hide her face in embarrassment.
Theo reflects on his first love's beauty, kindness, and unwavering strength of will.
A vision of Commander Patricia appears, a tall woman in military uniform with long, wavy red hair.
A chibi Patty sweats nervously, feeling that the king's memory of her past self is far too glorified.
Back at the desk, Theo reassures Patty that he does not intend to treat her as a mere replacement.
The silver-haired king looks at her warmly, wishing for her to grow up happy and healthy by his side.
Patty listens in silence, her blue eyes reflecting a complicated mix of emotions as she processes his words.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick cue sounding as Patty grips her skirt, feeling unexpectedly sad.
Putting on a bright smile, the girl promises to live up to his expectations and grow up strong.
Theo watches her with a soft expression, offering a simple and quiet agreement to her vow.
Pushing her tea cart through the halls, Patty resolves to work hard for Theo's sake. A text box announces that half a year has passed as the scene shifts to the palace library.
Patty is slumped over a desk, letting out a tired groan while buried under a mountain of paperwork.
Roland approaches with the document, asking the girl if she is still struggling and offering his help.
Exhausted, Patty admits she cannot handle the mental load with her self-described muscle for brains. Roland points out her ink smudge while Patty reflects on how essential his efficiency is to the kingdom.
A symbolic frame depicts Theo and Roland as a pair who have been inseparable since before the coronation.
The red-haired girl looks up at the aide with a grateful smile while thanking him for his support.
Despite the fatigue, Patty insists on finishing her secretary duties properly before her upcoming break.
Roland realizes why she is working so hard, noting that her time off is finally approaching.
In the background, Theo sits amidst a dark, oppressive gloom, staring at them with intense, silent jealousy.
Roland notes how grumpy Theo becomes before Patty's time off while the girl looks on with concern.
Patty reflects on being 12 years old while remembering the family that took her in.
The girl feels guilty seeing Theo's sulky face, imagining him as a puppy begging to be taken along.
Roland asks the girl about her plans for her break while they continue working at the large table.
Theo stares intently, prompting Patty to suggest they finish their tasks with a strong effort.
The warm afternoon sun streams through a large arched window, signaling the end of the workday. Patty raises her arms in triumph, joyfully announcing that she has finally completed all of her paperwork.
Theo and Roland look toward her as the girl offers her final thanks for their patience.
The girl bows politely, informing the men she will return in 3 days after her family visit.
Theo watches her leave with a somber, lonely expression, offering only a brief and quiet farewell.
Now wearing a traveler's cloak and carrying a bag, Patty walks through the sunlit palace hallway. A maid asks if she is starting her break tomorrow, and Patty confirms she is heading home now.
Seeing the maid's worried face, Patty wonders if the palace staff remains afraid of the king's cold nature.
Patty reassures the woman that His Majesty is actually a kind person who would never harm anyone. The girl points out that she has survived 6 months of mouthing off to him without a single scratch.
The brown-haired maid lets out a cheerful laugh, admitting that Patty's survival is a very good point.
The maid wishes her a pleasant vacation while Patty promises to return to the palace soon.
Under a crescent moon, a horse-drawn carriage arrives at a noble estate in the quiet night.
Entering the house, Patty calls out that she is finally home, looking tired from her journey.
A sudden, sharp pitta sounding accompanies 2 red-haired men reacting with absolute shock and alarm.
The 2 men rush to hug her, scolding the palace for making a child work until such a late hour.
Patty apologizes for the delay while thinking that a part of her still feels detached from this new life. Walking inside, Patty wonders if she can truly embrace this second chance as the men lead her to dinner.
A text box identifies the next scene as the royal palace dining room. Theo and Roland sit at a long, candlelit table for dinner while the head lady-in-waiting stands nearby.
The silver-haired king looks annoyed, questioning why he must endure another meal face-to-face with his aide.
Roland tells him not to be so cold, claiming he is only keeping the lonely king company out of kindness.
Watching them bicker, the maid realizes that Patty was right about the king not being scary after all.
Chibi Roland teases the king for sulking over Patty's absence, while Chibi Theo denies it with a blush.
Roland smiles to himself as a light bulb appears, seemingly coming up with a clever new plan. Roland suggests that the silver-haired king visit Patty in disguise while she is arrived. Holding his fork at the dinner table, Theo stares off with a somber, distant expression.
A sudden, sharp Sue sounding accompanies the 2 red-haired men looking completely drained and dejected.
Standing before her carriage, the red-haired girl watches her family members struggle with their emotions.
Patty insists they cannot skip the clan meeting while her father and brother look exhausted.
The men offer a tearful farewell as Patty prepares to head out for the day.
With a bright and cheerful wave, Patty says goodbye as she begins her solo outing.
A chibi Patty expresses her exhaustion from her family's intensity while celebrating her temporary freedom.
Patty tells her maid she is heading out and asks to be prepared for Tom. Dressed in a beautiful ruffled pink gown, the red-haired girl looks elegant and perfectly composed.
The 2 maids are absolutely dazzled by how stunning and adorable the young girl looks. Watching the servants, Patty reflects on how much kinder the current palace staff has become.
Patty walks through the halls, deducing her father replaced the staff as a form of atoner.
The scene shifts to a bright town square where the red-haired girl begins her secret mission.
The maid asks about her plans, and Patty confirms she has a specific goal in mind.
A vision of luxury items appears as Patty admits her true cravings differ from her family's.
The young girl looks ahead with a determined expression, focused on the task at hand.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick swishing sound as Patty moves toward her destination.
Standing before a large stone building, Patty asks her maid to wait outside for a moment.
A sudden, sharp gee sounding accompanies the girl's small pink shoe stepping into the dark shop.
Inside the smithy, a burly blacksmith looks up from his desk with a skeptical, stern expression.
The man dismisses the young girl, claiming his workshop is no place for a little lady. Patty stands her ground across the counter, staring back at the large man with quiet confidence.
The girl smiles to herself, remembering how others made similar comments to her in the past.
Patty requests a lightweight weapon while looking at a large sword resting on the counter.
The blacksmith reacts with a look of pure confusion, sweat dropping at the girl's unusual request.
The red-haired girl stares intently at the heavy blade, assessing its quality and magical potential.
A sudden, sharp zushu sounding accompanies Patty's struggle as she tries to lift the massive sword.
The blacksmith looks down smugly, pointing out that he warned her the weapon was too heavy. The man's eyes widen in shock as he witnesses something completely unexpected from the small girl.
Patty channels her immense magic into the blade, causing it to erupt in brilliant golden flames.
A close-up reveals the shimmering golden light and sparkles dancing along the sword's powerful edge.
The magical energy flows perfectly through the hilt as Patty demonstrates her high-level combat capability.
Patty explains she sought high magical conductivity while the blacksmith trembles with a sudden, startling realization.
The blacksmith shouts out her true name in absolute disbelief, pointing at her with shaking hands. Chibi Patty plays. The man narrows his eyes, focusing intensely as he processes the impossibility of her current form. The blacksmith identifies her identical magical signature, noting he spent years crafting her personal weapons. Finally, dropping her act, Patty admits her identity and explains her accidental transformation into a child. The blacksmith remains in a state of shock, questioning the bizarre circumstances of her recent disappearance.
Sitting together in the workshop, the two old acquaintances begin to discuss their shared past.
The man explains he thought she died during the 5 years she was missing from knighthood.
Looking somber, the blacksmith admits he never expected her to return in such a young body.
The man looks at her warmly, expressing his genuine relief that his former customer is alive.
Patty laments her lost muscle mass while the man laughs, encouraging her to rebuild her strength.
The girl admits that restarting life is difficult and not the wonderful dream others might imagine.
Flashbacks show Commander Patricia's hard-won achievements, mourning everything she lost except for her own life. The blacksmith reaches for a different weapon, suggesting a short sword better suited for her size.
He presents a beautiful, sheathed short sword that shines under the light of the workshop lamps.
Patty holds the new weapon with a bright smile, declaring it perfect for her current physical capabilities.
A close-up of the red-haired girl reveals her intense blue eyes reflecting deep, quiet contemplation.
Flashbacks of training a silver-haired boy contrast with the king's current somber and lonely expression. The burly blacksmith surprises Patty by mentioning he still crafts the king's personal weaponry today. Explaining his desire for peace, the man hands Patty a package while keeping his status secret.
Patty feels a sense of warmth, glad that Theo still treasures the memories they shared together.
The blacksmith offers future modifications while the young red-haired girl expresses her sincere and polite thanks.
Patty asks her friend to keep her identity secret and the man promises his absolute silence.
A sudden, sharp gee sounding accompanies the girl exiting the shop as her maid watches curiously. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick ha sounding as Patty hides her new weapon.
Patty urgently begs the maid not to mention this outing to her father or her brother.
The brown-haired maid happily agrees while a chibi Patty celebrates successfully hiding her secret purchase.
With the mission complete, the cheerful girl leads the way to find some cute town shops.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick fwa sounding as Patty feels a familiar presence. A sudden, sharp joy sounding accompanies Patty's look of absolute shock as she spots someone nearby. Patty is stunned to see a black-haired man, instantly wondering if His Majesty has followed her.
Chibi Patty notes the different hair color while frantically questioning why Theo is in the town.
The girl wonders what he is doing as the tall man walks calmly through the square.
The black-haired man remains silent, his expression unreadable as he moves through the crowded street.
Remarking on the coincidence, the man greets her in a monotone voice while Patty suppresses laughter.
The red-haired girl asks the man what a king is doing wandering around in a disguise. Theo claims he is currently just a wandering traveler rather than a king on official business. Patty points out that his incredibly neat and elegant appearance completely ruins his civilian traveler disguise.
A chibi Theo explains that a true ruler must observe the lives of his people firsthand.
Patty asks if he came alone, and the black-haired man confirms his solo and secret journey.
Looking off to the side, Theo insists that he is acting strictly as a civilian right now.
Chibi Patty loses her temper, shouting that he is far too important to be wandering around unguarded.
Touching the sword in her bag, Patty decides she must stick by him to ensure his safety.
The maid watches them with a look of pure confusion, completely lost regarding their secret conversation.
Patty rationalizes that even if he is stubborn, the king is truly a good person at heart.
The red-haired girl speaks up, trying to address him formally before he cuts her off.
Letting out a tired and heavy sigh, the girl finally addresses the disguised king as Lord Theo.
Surrounded by a radiant, flowery aura, the black-haired man offers her a gentle and dazzling smile.
Chibi Patty groans in annoyance, feeling completely overwhelmed by the man's incredibly radiant and beautiful aura.
Clearing her throat, Patty questions why
why he neglected to bring even a single guard for protection.
Theo raises his hand, casually claiming he has the power to stop anyone's heart if he wishes.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp gasp sounding as the maid recoils from his threat.
Staring back with a flat, unimpressed expression, the red-haired girl internally calls the king a fool.
Thinking as a former commander, Patty realizes she can see right through the king's overconfident bravado.
Patty argues that an assassin doesn't need to be close to kill someone using various hidden methods.
Theo smiles smugly, claiming poison is useless and it would be incredibly difficult for anyone to kill him.
The red-haired girl stares sternly, reminding him of her past lessons about the deadly nature of overconfidence.
Theo acknowledges her unbeatable close combat skills while maintaining his smug and confident demeanor at the table.
Patty warns him that enemies surely have ways to bypass his strength just as she can. Resigned to the situation, Patty suggests they travel together, relying on her magic despite her physical size.
Theo looks at her with a smirk, asking if she is actually promising to act as his protector.
With a small and knowing smile, the red-haired girl confirms her decision to guard the king.
A close-up reveals the black-haired man remaining silent as he processes the girl's protective and sincere offer.
Theo's expression suddenly turns dark and intense as he tells her she doesn't need to do that. A sudden, quick baiku sounding accompanies Patty and the maid flinching at the king's sudden shift.
Narrowing his red eyes, the black-haired man stares down with an expression of deep and frightening intensity.
A flashback shows adult Patricia walking into the light, vowing to prevent further casualties.
A close-up of the red-haired girl's blue eyes reflects her deep, lingering sorrow.
Patty reflects on Theo's kindness, realizing he truly cares about others despite his attitude.
Maintaining his stoic demeanor, the black-haired man claims that showing kindness is simply pointless. The red-haired girl smiles, knowing that his desire to protect others defines true kindness.
Patty suggests they move on, playfully inviting the disguised king to continue their stroll together.
The group stands in awkward silence while the maid struggles to keep up with them. Patty remembers how she used to grab Theo's arm during their past outings together.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick squeeze sounding as Patty grabs Theo's sleeve.
Surrounded by flowers, Theo agrees to continue their walk while Patty watches him with surprise. High above the town, the ornate rooftops stand out against a bright, clear blue sky.
The two walk through the bustling market square, blending in with the diverse town crowd.
Keeping her distance, the brown-haired maid watches the pair with an expression of pure exhaustion.
Smiling cheerfully, the red-haired girl reassures her worried maid that everything is completely fine.
Patty realizes Theo is checking prices to better understand the economic state of his kingdom.
A flashback reveals Patricia and a silver-haired boy walking through the town in similar fashion.
Commander Patricia laughs while holding street food, much to the young silver-haired boy's visible annoyance. The young boy's eyes sparkle as he tries street food for the very first time. Looking back with a gentle expression, the red-haired girl cherishes the warmth of her memories.
Theo breaks her train of thought by asking if she has any specific food cravings.
Patty looks up with excitement, admitting she would love to eat something sweet right now.
The black-haired man notes her love for sweets and suggests visiting a nearby park stare. Theo questions her frequent secret outings while the two continue walking down the paved street.
A panoramic view reveals a beautiful park featuring ornate fountains, bridges, and lush green gardens.
Theo describes the park as the most beautiful location in the entire capital city. The red-haired girl agrees wholeheartedly, amazed by the stunning architecture and peaceful atmosphere.
Patty's expression shifts to concern as she realizes the quiet park is perfect for ambushes.
The quiet atmosphere makes the location dangerous, providing easy cover for any potential hidden attackers.
Theo explains the park's history, noting it was built a century ago for a coronation.
While Theo continues his historical explanation, the red-haired girl remains alert to their surroundings.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick thump sounding as Patty senses immediate danger.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick rumble sounding as dark magic appears above.
A massive magical sphere looms over the park, casting a purple glow over the area.
Patty looks up in alarm, realizing they're about to be struck by powerful magic.
The two stand together as the dark, swirling energy prepares to descend upon the park. Patty frantically searches for a way to block the attack before it harms her or Theo. Disgusted by her weak child body, Patty resolves to act as a human shield for him. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick dash sounding as Patty jumps before the king.
Theo looks up calmly, his focused expression revealing he has things well under his control.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick grip sounding as Patty reaches for her belt.
Patty lets out a sound of surprise as Theo pulls her into his protective embrace.
Patty is frozen in shock as the king holds her close amidst the magical chaos. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick motion sounding as Theo prepares a counterspell. The black-haired man points his finger toward the magical sphere with absolute focus and precision. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick burst sounding as the sphere shatters instantly. Nearby townspeople recoil in terror as the powerful magical explosion echoes through the public park.
Theo remains calm, holding the red-haired girl as glowing petals flutter through the aftermath.
Looking up at him, Patty is left speechless by the king's overwhelming power and skill.
The red-haired girl recalls a time when she scolded him for using such dangerous techniques.
Trembling slightly, Patty reaches out to the man while trying to speak his name aloud.
Theo informs the red-haired girl that he does not need a child for protection.
Patty admits that her body moved instinctively when she saw someone in danger before her. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick sob sounding as Patty cries from frustration. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick gasp sounding as Theo reacts in shock. Theo panics and begs her not to cry, explaining he was only worried for her. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick squeeze sounding as Patty clutches her dress. The red-haired girl stands alone in the garden, looking incredibly distressed while she continues crying.
A close-up reveals Theo's softening gaze as he watches the girl with a concerned expression.
Patty wonders if her physical regression is making her more emotionally childish as she sobs.
The girl thanks him for saving her while lamenting her current lack of real power.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick bow sounding as Patty lowers her ebb. Theo apologizes for startling her with his harsh words while wiping away her lingering tears.
Patty looks at him with curiosity, asking what the powerful magical attack earlier was exactly.
Theo dismisses the danger, claiming his life is always a target for various assassination attempts.
The black-haired man offers a sincere apology for getting her involved in his royal dangers.
Patty repeats her question, eager to understand how he blocked the magic so easily earlier.
Labeled as a magic nerd, the girl frantically asks about the defense magic mechanics used.
Theo casually explains that he simply hit the attack head-on using his own concentrated mana. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick gasp sounding as Patty realizes the truth.
Patty reflects that while mana usually needs spells, Theo crushed the attack with pure control.
The girl realizes Theo anticipated and countered the only assassination plan she could imagine today.
The tall, black-haired man stands with his back turned, looking over the palace garden grounds.
Patty reflects on how much stronger and more grown-up Theo has become since their past.
The girl realizes she still viewed him as a subordinate she was responsible for protecting.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick trot sounding as Patty checks on him.
Theo looks at his hand with focus, checking for any injuries from the counterspell used.
A chibi Patty suggests returning to the palace immediately to avoid any further magical ambushes.
Theo suggests saving their visit to the boutique and cafe for a future outing together.
Smiling gently, the red-haired girl agrees to their future plans to meet again another day.
Surrounded by radiant flowers, the black-haired man offers her a happy and dazzlingly warm smile.
The pair walks away hand in hand through the sunny garden, leaving the public park behind.
The scene shifts to the next day as Patty walks through a grand palace hallway. Patty finds it a hassle to dodge her overprotective family just to leave the house. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick chime sounding as she spots a mare. A gray-haired man named Lord Roland greets Patty warmly, welcoming her back to the palace.
Patty and Lord Roland walk together, sharing a comfortable and friendly moment of casual conversation.
The girl asks if the culprit from the park attack was successfully caught by guards. Roland explains the culprit escaped, but they have a good idea who was truly responsible. The red-haired girl looks serious, her mind focused on the identity of the dangerous attacker. Lord Roland confirms her suspicions, his gaze turning serious as he explains the situation further.
A flashback shows a battlefield where a woman tried to wipe out an entire unit. A blonde woman in a blue dress is revealed as someone who truly despises Theo.
Roland notes the woman escaped after the former king's death and remains missing even now.
Narration confirms she is likely being sheltered by her birth family at the Duke's house.
Patty suggests that a mole must be operating close to the kingdom's center of power.
Lord Roland asks the girl if she has any specific suspects in mind for the mole. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick click sounding as Patty stops her walk.
Patty confronts Lord Roland directly, suggesting he might be the secret traitor they seek today.
A dramatic silence occurs as the girl asks if Lord Roland is indeed the hidden traitor. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick wail sounding as Roland frantically denies her.
Lord Roland smiles at the red-haired girl, expressing his wish that she would simply admit to trusting him.
Patty reflects that as the king's right-hand man, Lord Roland could have killed Theo easily without hiring assassins.
Roland's high status in the Alvarez Marquisite makes it unlikely he would gain anything by betraying the king.
While walking through the palace, the gray-haired man notes that the king has made many dangerous enemies lately. Patty is shocked when Roland mentions rumors of a surviving royal member being supported by secret rebel factions.
The red-haired girl is stunned to hear Roland admit that his own family leans toward the anti-government faction.
The two walk toward the grand palace doors, the weight of their political discussion hanging in the air. Lord Roland gestures politely as they stop, while Patty continues to look at him with lingering suspicion.
A close-up of the gray-haired man reveals a subtle, knowing smile as he looks back at the girl.
Roland becomes comically fired up about going home, while Patty simply tells him to have a good rest.
The pair shares a friendly farewell, waving to each other as they agree to meet again the next day.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick knock sounding as Patty requests permission to enter the king's room. Patty enters the spacious office where the silver-haired man is sitting with his back toward the door. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick click sounding as the gray-haired man stands alone in the hallway.
Lord Roland reflects on how Patty is strangely sharp for her age, attributing it to a wild, animalistic intuition.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick chuckle sounding as Roland walks away while noting her humble background. Walking down the long corridor, the gray-haired man moodily reflects that some things are simply beyond his control now.
Bowing deeply in the royal office, Patty thanks the silver-haired king for granting her recent time off.
Theo looks up from his desk with a serious expression, questioning why she has returned to work so early.
Patty is frustrated when Theo dismisses her to rest, considering he was the one sneaking out to see her. Looking to the side, the red-haired girl admits to herself that the king's kindness is often difficult to understand.
Patty begs not to be sent away so coldly, admitting she came back early because she thought he'd be lonely.
The silver-haired king looks completely flustered by her blunt honesty, leading Patty to think some things never change.
From a high angle, the red-haired girl stands in the middle of the room and vows to work hard.
Theo sits in his grand chair and eventually relents, softly telling the girl to go and rest well.
Back in her own room at night, Patty sits on her bed while solemnly examining a small unsheathed dagger.
Recalling the park attack, Patty laments her current helplessness and her failed desire for a normal, peaceful life.
Patty realizes her peaceful childhood is unsatisfying because her current body forces others to constantly protect her.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick rustle sounding as Patty stands in her darkened bedroom. Determined to change her fate, the red-haired girl resolves to train herself to gain much-needed stamina and muscle.
Patty practices her military drills with the dagger, finding that her current body still remembers her past training.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick huff sounding as Patty collapses onto the floor in total exhaustion.
Panting heavily while lying on the ground, the girl realizes she cannot continue being this physically weak.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick knock sounding as Patty, now in a maid uniform, announces her arrival. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick throb sounding as Patty's sore muscles protest while she carries a basin.
The red-haired girl freezes in shock as she looks toward the king's bed during her morning rounds.
Surrounded by a floral aura, the silver-haired king sleeps peacefully while hugging his pillow in a vulnerable manner.
Watching him sleep, Patty smiles warmly and thinks about how different his resting face is from his usual self.
A flashback shows Patty scolding a younger Theo for grabbing his bunkmate in his sleep during their military days.
Leaning in close to the sleeping king, the red-haired girl enjoys a rare moment of quiet, peaceful nostalgia.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick gasp sounding as Theo wakes up and sees Patty right before him.
Patty cheerfully tells the startled king it is time for him to wake up and get washed for the day.
Looking up from his pillow with a dazed expression,
The silver-haired man softly calls out Patty's name. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick shiver sounding as Patty insists she is fine despite her visible shaking.
Theo immediately notices her physical distress and offers to use his powerful magic to heal her body.
Horrified, Patty refuses the healing magic because she believes it will undo all her hard-earned muscle progress instantly.
Standing in the middle of the room, the red-haired maid explains her pain is simply from training her body. The silver-haired king looks absolutely confused, unable to understand why she would prefer pain over a quick magical cure.
Patty declares that she wants to be strong enough to protect him, which is why she refuses the healing. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick flex sounding as Chibi Patty enthusiastically shows off her determination.
The silver-haired man sits calmly on the bed while the red-haired girl watches him from behind.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick puff sounding as Theo chuckles while covering his blushing face.
Theo tells the red-haired maid she needn't laugh so hard, while Patty begins a hesitant, stuttered reply.
Patty recalls a training memory where she struggled with heavy barrels while Theo watched her and laughed. Looking at her with a gentle, enamored expression, Theo reflects that he simply couldn't help falling for her.
The red-haired girl is completely stunned by his admission, her face flushing as she stands frozen in shock.
Walking through the palace, Patty reflects on how exhausted she feels from her sore muscles and intense training.
Fellow palace maids greet Patty warmly as she passes, and she offers a polite, friendly morning greeting back.
Patty eats her lunch with resolve, determined to train her muscles and strictly monitor her food intake today. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick clatter sounding as Patty coughs blood and collapses mid-meal. Lord Roland bursts into the room with great urgency, calling out to the king with a panicked expression.
Theo looks up from a meeting with officials, questioning the gray-haired man about the reason for his interruption.
Roland whispers the devastating news that Patty has been poisoned and collapsed after vomiting blood in the kitchen.
A close-up of Theo's eyes reveals them glowing a menacing red as his cold, terrifying fury takes hold. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick bang sounding as the silver-haired king stands up in total rage. Theo storms out of the meeting room immediately, leaving the gathered officials behind in a state of shock.
Patty lies unconscious on the floor as the desperate voice of the silver-haired king calls out her name.
Theo runs toward the fallen red-haired girl while the palace maids watch the scene with expressions of horror.
Cradling the unconscious Patty in his arms, Theo looks devastated as she remains unresponsive with blood on her.
In a dreamlike state, Patty reflects on the blessing of her family and her ability to think clearly.
The red-haired girl slowly wakes up in a grand bed, feeling the soft sunlight on her confused face.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick rustle sounding as Theo, sitting nearby, reacts to her waking up. Overjoyed, Theo holds her hands tightly and exclaims how relieved he is that she has finally regained consciousness.
The silver-haired man explains he couldn't possibly sleep while she was in such a dangerous, poisoned state recently.
Theo reveals that she remained unconscious for 3 days despite him using both detoxification and powerful healing magic.
A close-up shows the king's hands clutching hers as he expresses his profound gladness for her recovery today.
Leaning over the bed, the silver-haired man watches the red-haired girl with an expression of intense, quiet devotion.
Smiling warmly, Patty thanks the king for his efforts and for saving her life from the deadly poison.
Theo requests she call him Lord Theo instead of Your Majesty, and Patty agrees with a cheerful laugh.
Looking solemn, the silver-haired man admits he feels responsible for her danger because he kept her so close.
Patty reaches out and reassures Theo that she would never hold any resentment toward him for these events.
Theo holds her hand with a focused, protective intensity, his heart visibly heavy with concern for her well-being.
Narration explains that Patty was required to remain in her room for a long period of quiet rest.
Fellow maids visit Patty's bedside, while narration notes the poisoning has been officially kept a palace secret today.
Patty happily reflects that the staff truly loves her now, which is hard to believe given her past. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick click sounding as Lord Roland enters the room to check.
The red-haired girl assures the gray-haired man that she is fine thanks to the king's magical healing intervention.
Roland is relieved she looks healthy, while Patty offers an apology for making everyone feel so much worry.
Roland explains that the king stayed by her side for 3 days and neglected his official duties to watch.
Patty is moved to tears as she listens to the gray-haired man describe the king's absolute, unwavering devotion.
A close-up of Lord Roland's eyes reveals a serious look as he prepares to explain the king's change.
Standing by her bed, Roland explains that the silver-haired king has become more human-like all because of her.
The red-haired girl looks back at him with confusion, surprised by his perspective on the king's evolving nature.
Roland explains that the king is like a monster whose vast magic heals any injury without him even trying.
A flashback shows the silver-haired king on a battlefield, a man who once had nothing precious and no hesitation.
Roland explains that Patty's life was targeted because the king's once untouchable reign of terror has finally been shaken.
Images of the palace and city illustrate Theo's complex legacy of fear, ending wars, and saving many people.
Close on her eye, Patty reflects that she already knows the true depth of the king's hidden kindness.
The red-haired girl turns to the gray-haired man and asks if he is still afraid of the king.
Lord Roland pauses and looks away thoughtfully, his gaze reflecting a deep and complex history with the king.
The gray-haired man mentions the king's cuteness, and the red-haired girl enthusiastically agrees with him.
Roland explains that the inherent fear people feel towards someone so powerful is difficult to suppress.
Patty reflects on how a reign of terror built on fear will eventually fall apart. Encouraged by Roland's words, the red-haired girl suggests a positive strategy despite her recent poisoning.
Patty asks Lord Roland for suggestions on how to improve the public perception of Nakem.
A subtle, knowing smile spreads across the gray-haired man's face as they continue their discussion.
Roland advises the girl that her constant presence beside the king might change how others see him. Patty envisions the king showing kindness to small animals to help soften his intimidating public image.
A flashback shows a younger, silver-haired Theo gently caring for a fallen bird in the barracks.
Laughing brightly, the red-haired girl praises the gray-haired man for his brilliant and helpful ideas. Roland expresses his personal hope that the girl will become someone truly precious to the king.
Determined, Patty vows to demonstrate their closeness to everyone for the sake of the king's reputation. Her attention is taken by a sudden quick click sounding as the headmaid enters Theo's office.
The silver-haired king sits at his desk and declares his desire to move Patty to another room.
Looking surprised, the older headmaid asks the king where he intends to relocate the red-haired girl.
Theo calmly states that her new quarters will be located directly adjacent to his own royal chambers.
The headmaid looks stunned as she points out that those rooms are reserved for the queen.
The sun shines brightly into a grand, luxurious bedroom filled with elegant furniture and sparkling decor.
Patty stands in her new room and reflects on the sudden move following her recovery from poisoning.
The red-haired girl mentions her suspicion that this room was once used by the realm's successive queens.
Standing in the middle of the lavish room, the headmaid confirms that it is the queen's chamber. Patty is horrified to learn that the king's room is right next door and questions the situation.
The headmaid explains that the move was done according to the king's direct and absolute command.
Patty begs to return to her old room, but the headmaid firmly denies her request.
Reappearing in her maid uniform, Patty confronts the king and asks him to change her room back.
Theo notes her energy with a smile, but refuses to let her move back to her old quarters.
The red-haired girl asks if he understands the room's significance, and the king confirms that he does.
Theo explains the room is the closest to his, while Patty remains flustered by the implications.
Patty insists she was referring to the traditional purpose of the room, not just its physical location.
The king admits he hesitated to assign her the room previously occupied by his first love.
Theo explains it is the most heavily guarded place where he can personally ensure her safety. The silver-haired king notes that both he and the red-haired girl have become targets for assassination.
Patty recalls the recent poisoning and realizes the culprit responsible is still hidden somewhere within the palace.
The red-haired girl reflects on how the king's special affection for her has become widely known. Narration explains that enemies targeted Patty to cause the king psychological pain, as he still mourns his love. Theo vows to do everything in his power to protect her, leaving Patty briefly at a loss. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick throb sounding as Theo expresses his intense protective feelings.
Patty is overwhelmed by the idea of being in the queen's chamber while merely being an orphan.
The red-haired girl sighs and decides she doesn't care what others think about her new living arrangements.
Theo dismisses the opinions of others, reminding her that he is already considered a usurper and tyrant.
Looking cold, the silver-haired man promises to crush anyone who dares to publicly criticize him.
Patty is struck with regret, realizing how her past military advice has negatively influenced the king's morals.
Her attention is taken by a sudden quick rattle sounding as two maids arrive with a cart.
Theo invites Patty to sit and share the meal with him rather than letting it go to waste.
A delicious-looking slider sits on a plate, gleaming under the bright dining room lights.
Patty prepares to eat her lunch while one of the maids stands silently and suspiciously behind her.
Her attention is taken by a sudden quick slide sounding as a concealed dagger is unsheathed.
The maid suddenly lunges forward with the weapon, aiming a lethal strike directly at the seated Patty.
Horrified, the red-haired girl realizes her reflexes are too slow to avoid the incoming blade in time. Her attention is taken by a sudden quick splash sounding as Patty is struck and falls over. Theo catches the assassin's dagger with his bare hand, bleeding while shielding the red-haired call.
Looking shocked, the gray-haired maid exclaims in disbelief as she realizes her lethal strike was blocked.
Her attention is taken by a sudden quick gag sounding as the maid coughs up blood and collapses.
The brown-haired maid cries out that she will call for help immediately while guards arrive on the scene.
Patty is terrified to see blood on Theo's hand, but he calmly holds the damaged blade without flinching.
Theo shows the red-haired girl his hand, which is completely healed through his automatic regeneration magic.
A close-up reveals the silver-haired king's unblemished palm as the faint light of healing magic finally fades. Staring at his hand, the red-haired girl is captivated by the incredible display of his divine power.
Patty begins to cry and apologizes for the immense danger she caused the king during the attack.
The silver-haired man watches her emotional outburst with a look of quiet, thoughtful contemplation.
Patty apologizes for using a military tone and begs for the king's forgiveness for her sudden outburst. Theo's voice asks if she finds him repulsive even after seeing the monster-like nature of his magic.
Looking somber, the silver-haired king asks the red-haired girl if she has grown afraid of him. Patty reassures Theo that she finds his magical abilities impressive and useful rather than frightening or grotesque. Theo lets out a soft, relieved laugh, clearly comforted by the girl's honest and accepting response.
Theo notes that dangerous situations like this are exactly why Patty must stay close by his side.
Patty worries that people think the king took a child bride, but Theo doesn't mind the rumor.
The red-haired girl insists the king must carry himself with more dignity as a noble sovereign.
Patty enthusiastically suggests a positive image strategy to help the public see the king in a better light. Patty explains that displaying fatherly affection toward her will help dispel the king's reputation as a tyrant.
Theo smiles gently and pats Patty on the head, noting how adorable her earnest suggestion is. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick raspberry sounding as Patty playfully sticks out her tongue.
Roland and the guards watch from the doorway, with the gray-haired man looking amused by them.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick snicker sounding as Roland attempts to hide his laughter.
The scene shifts to Patty and Theo sharing a pleasant afternoon tea in a sun-drenched room.
Theo and Patty walk through the capital together, drawing many curious stares from the local citizens.
The silver-haired man smiles warmly as he watches Patty happily admire a bear-shaped pastry at market.
Munching on her treat, Patty reflects that the king's public displays of affection often felt quite squirmy. Narration explains that the public began to notice how much more expressive and gentle the king became. Two maids observe the king and note he is clearly smitten with the lovely red-haired girl.
A close-up shows the red-haired girl looking radiant and full of life as she continues her duties.
Patty reflects on how she found herself naturally drawn to the king's side every single day.
A grand set of double doors swings open, revealing the bright sunlight of a beautiful new day.
Now 16 years old, Patty enters the king's office with a large suitcase, apologizing for the disturbance.
Patty teasingly notes the deep frown between the king's brows as he looks up from his work.
Theo explains that her father and brother are insisting she return home, and he cannot intervene.
Flashback text explains that after being targeted by an assassin at 13, Patty stayed for her safety.
Patty wonders what her family is planning now that they have suddenly insisted on her homecoming trip.
Theo looks worried, admitting he is concerned about her going somewhere where he cannot personally protect her.
Flexing her arm, the older red-haired girl reassures the king that she has become quite strong.
Patty recalls the bloodstained dagger from 3 years ago and her vow to train her physical body.
The red-haired girl declares her need to push her muscles even harder to build more strength. Theo watches her with a gentle gaze and promises to always protect her no matter what.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick snap sounding as Patty playfully rejects his overprotective offer.
Patty smiles brightly and vows that she will become strong enough to protect the king as well.
Narration reveals Patty secretly mastered magic and, with a mysterious ally, established a defense net for the palace. The invisible magical defense net has been silently eliminating assassins targeting the king without his knowledge. Patty smiles as Roland enters the room, noting that her lack of physical strength isn't the issue.
Roland looks at the red-haired woman as she stands before the king's desk in the office.
Roland explains that he is apparently returning home tonight, and the red-haired woman understands the reason why.
Roland smiles cheerfully while Theo maintains a stern, focused expression in the palace office.
Roland teases that they have similar expressions, but Patty dismisses any romantic connection to Theo.
Returning home, Patty is warmly greeted and embraced by her father and brother at their estate. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick glance sounding as her family observes her arrival.
Her father remarks on the impressive armored bodyguards that the king has sent for Patty's protection.
The red-haired girl smiles softly, clearly happy to be reunited with her family after so long.
Her father presents her with several gifts while Patty expresses her sincere gratitude to both men.
Narration notes that her family showers her with love to compensate for their past emotional neglect.
During their meal, Patty's father brings up the topic of her making a formal social debut.
Her father insists that now she has reached 16, it is finally time for her debut. Patty reflects on her past life's military isolation and her hidden longing for beautiful social events.
Her father explains that he knows she has been busy as a court lady, but he wants her debut to be handled properly for their family.
Staring intently, the red-haired girl remembers how her family previously ignored the original owner's needs. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick clink sounding as Patty agrees to the father's plan. Her brother notes how quickly time has passed and proudly calls Patty a proper young lady.
Patty contemplates the relatively small age difference between herself and the silver-haired king in thought bubbles.
The red-haired girl insists that her relationship with Theo is strictly between a lord and subordinate. The brown-haired maid asks Patty if she's exciting about finally debuting in high society.
The maid reveals that the count prepared for Patty's return long before she actually came home.
Looking surprised, Patty listens to the maid describe a specially prepared dress and set of accessories. The red-haired girl is struck by the realization of her father's secret devotion and care. Looking down at her footwear, Patty asks the maid if she can see the prepared press. Patty explains her desire to use the garment as a stylistic reference for her official debut.
The maid happily confirms the dress should be in her room, and of course she can see it.
Looking toward the mansion at night, Patty reflects on the painful memories of her former room.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick creak sounding as the maid opens the door.
The duo enters a quiet bedroom featuring a large bed and a shrouded object in center.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick gasp sounding as Patty sees the room's improvements.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick swish sounding as the maid pulls back the cloth.
A magnificent, layered gown is revealed, standing elegantly on a mannequin in the middle of room. Patty stands in silent awe as she finally sees the dress her father kept for her. The maid explains that the master occasionally comes here and gazes at the dress with a wistful look.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick tap sounding as Patty turns and departs the room.
Overcome with emotion, the red-haired girl cries while questioning the sudden display of her father's love.
Back at the palace, Roland welcomes Patty home as Theo works diligently at his desk.
Patty thanks the king for the time away and mentions she enjoyed her stay with her father. Standing tall in her uniform, Patty makes a firm and sudden declaration regarding her social debut. Her attention is taken by a sudden quick slam sounding as Theo reacts with visible shock. Looking utterly stunned, the silver-haired man repeats Patty's mention of a debut in high society aloud. Her attention is taken by a sudden quick shush sounding as the room becomes incredibly tense.
Roland leans forward with a nervous smile while discussing the implications of her entering the social circle.
The red-haired girl confirms she has turned 16 and is ready to fulfill her social obligations. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick sweat sounding as Roland notes the king's darkening mood. A heavy, dark aura begins to surround the seated king as he listens to the conversation. Roland points out that a social debut means she will be viewed as a potential marriage candidate. Roland laughs awkwardly while Patty looks confused by the connection between a debut and marriage candidates. Patty mentions she isn't planning to get married immediately, but rather only if someone decent comes along. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick twitch sounding as Theo's face twists with extreme jealousy. Theo leans forward and loudly demands to know if marriage or her master is more important. Looking completely caught off guard, the red-haired girl stares back at the king in total confusion.
Patty yells at Roland as he notes she's mimicking the king's stubbornness.
The red-haired girl angrily points out that Roland encouraged her to work at the palace. Theo looks away with a troubled expression as the conversation becomes more heated. Theo sternly denies Patty's request for an extended leave of absence to prepare for her debut. Patty protests, stating that her employment contract explicitly grants her the right to take leave. The king points out a clause stating leave can be denied depending on the palace workload. Patty argues that they aren't busy, while Roland watches the two bicker with a neutral face. Theo insists the workload will increase soon, much to the confusion of the red-haired girl. Patty worries about how her debut announcement turned into such a complicated and stressful mess. Roland attempts to calm them down, suggesting they focus on work and discuss leave later.
Theo gazes at her with a heavy heart and asks if she truly desires to marry.
The red-haired girl looks back at the silver-haired man, caught off guard by a sudden question.
Patty remains silent, her eyes showing a mix of surprise and deep internal reflection. Narration explains that Patty's debut is about personal fulfillment rather than seeking a marriage proposal. Patty is determined to have a debut for the sake of her family and past life. The silver-haired man accepts her answer with a quiet sigh, looking down at his paperwork.
The scene shifts to Patty and Roland walking through a grand lamplit hallway at night.
Roland directly asks the red-haired girl if she has any romantic feelings for the king.
Patty clarifies that she only feels deep respect for her master, though Roland remains skeptical.
Patty thinks the king's affection is just a projection of his first love's memory onto her.
The red-haired girl firmly repeats that she has no intention of ever becoming the queen. Patty reminds Roland that he was the one who originally warned her about the dangers of royalty.
Roland confesses that he finds her more interesting than expected and would support her as queen.
The red-haired girl looks at Roland with suspicion, confused by his sudden change of heart.
Roland walks ahead, asking who else could possibly handle the burden of being the queen.
Narration explains that despite improvements, noble women still fear approaching the king due to his reputation.
A flashback shows a maid suffering because the king's uncontrolled magical energy was far too potent.
The public's lingering fear of the king's lethal power keeps him isolated from high society.
Patty feels pity for the king, reflecting on how great power often leads to immense loneliness.
Roland bids her goodnight, reiterating that he would welcome her as the new queen. A close-up shows the red-haired girl looking conflicted as she considers the implications of his words. Patty imagines a romantic and elegant moment where she is held closely by the king.
The red-haired girl's face flushes a deep red as she reacts with shock to her imagination.
GB Patty admits that while she doesn't hate the idea, she is still incredibly flustered.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick creak sounding as Patty opens her bedroom door.
Roland enters a dark room to meet a mysterious cloaked figure waiting by the candlelight. Looking at the visitor, the gray-haired man notes her visible desperation through his sharp gaze. The cloaked figure is revealed to be the Queen Dowager, looking cold and regal. The blonde woman asks if Roland is still pretending to be a loyal servant to the monster. Roland assures her that he has been working hard to maintain the king's absolute trust. The gray-haired man points out that he has been providing her with very useful information.
The Queen Dowager turns to leave, preparing to deliver a final warning to her secret ally.
The blonde woman commands him not to grow attached to the king, and Roland complies. The Queen Dowager's expression turns murderous as she vows to eliminate the king. A close-up shows her golden-orange eyes filled with a terrifying, vengeful resolve.
The blonde woman notes a stray hair on Roland's head as their secret meeting ends. Roland apologizes for the oversight and promises to fix his appearance immediately.
The Queen Dowager reminds her son that his royal bloodline must remain an absolute secret.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick snicker sounding as Roland calls himself a trump card.
Back at the estate, Patty's father shows her a beautiful pink gown for her debut ball.
Patty's father discusses the need for refinement while inspecting a dress with her and her mother.
The red-haired girl takes another day off from her duties to spend more time back home.
Patty notes that both her father and brother are doing everything to make her debut flawless. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick sigh sounding as the red-haired girl looks somber.
Back at the palace, Patty informs the king she will return home this weekend for preparations.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick huff sounding as Theo turns his head away.
Standing by the desk, the red-haired girl thinks that pouting only works when one is a child.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick rattle sounding as the king fidgets while seated. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick slide sounding as Patty watches the silver-haired man. The red-haired girl is caught by surprise as the king reaches out to touch her head.
The silver-haired man offers a rare, gentle smile as he continues to gaze at his subordinate.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick flush sounding as Patty questions who is being childish. A series of memories show the king habitually patting the red-haired girl's head in various settings. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick flail sounding as Patty insists she is a lady. Patty realizes she is likely the only person Theo feels comfortable being so casual around. The red-haired girl wonders if they both struggle with emotional boundaries due to their shared upbringings. Back at the estate, the red-haired brother shows his sister several different fashion design sketches. Looking at the various sketches, the red-haired girl admits she honestly does not know which to pick. Patty offers a warm smile to her family as they discuss the final debutante dress selection.
Her father agrees to her choice with a loving expression as hearts float around the men.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick knock sounding as everyone turns toward the bar. A servant rushes in with urgent news, prompting a confused question from the red-haired father. A frantic report reveals that the king has sent an unexpected package to the family mansion. The red-haired family stands together in silence, looking apprehensive about the royal delivery's contents. Looking utterly bewildered, the father, brother, and daughter all exclaim in unison at the news.
The trio stares in shock as they begin to realize what the king has provided them.
A stunning, gem-encrusted gown in white and blue is revealed in the center of the room. A red jewelry box is open, displaying an exquisite necklace featuring a large, glowing blue gemstone. Patty is struck by the realization that the king has sent her a magnificent debutante gown. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick sigh sounding as her father and brother collapse. The red-haired girl stares at her family as they slump on the floor in utter defeat. Patty imagines the king mocking her family's past neglect by providing what they once failed to. Despite the awkwardness, the red-haired girl admits she is slowly beginning to accept her family again. Looking toward her slumped family, the red-haired girl notes the lack of headpieces or shoes. Patty beams with joy, her eyes shining as she finds a reason to be genuinely happy.
Overwhelmed with relief and love, both the brother and father begin to cry tears of joy. The two red-haired men pull Patty into a tight, emotional embrace to celebrate her forgiveness.
The brother comments on the gown's quality while the father acknowledges her demanding palace work.
Looking at each other, the two men wonder if she truly believes her own casual explanation.
The scene shifts back to the palace where the king gently pats the red-haired girl's hat.
Patty thanks her master for the leave, and the king acknowledges her return without looking up.
A close-up shows the king's hand as he suddenly stops writing mid-sentence upon hearing her voice.
Looking tearful, the red-haired girl prepares to add another comment to their brief conversation.
The silver-haired man listens quietly, his expression hidden as he processes her presence.
Patty continues her explanation while the silver-haired king listens with a slightly softened expression.
The red-haired girl breaks into a bright laugh, lightening the heavy atmosphere of the study.
Gazing at her with warmth, the silver-haired king admits that he is glad she has returned.
The scene transitions to the grand hall of the royal palace, bustling with guests and light.
Dressed in the king's gift, Patty makes her grand entrance accompanied by her father and brother.
Walking forward, the red-haired girl realizes many other young ladies are also making their debuts.
Patty makes her grand entrance at the ball alongside her father and brother.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick flutter sounding as the ladies look shocked.
The red-haired girl stares blankly at the crowd, confused by the sudden collective gasp.
Patty realizes everyone is staring at her dress, which feels too extravagant for her rank.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick sliding sounding as Patty tries to hide. The red-haired father looks strained while Patty offers a small, tight smile to the guests.
The red-haired brother stands beside them, his expression grim as they walk through the hall.
A detailed shot highlights the intricate gems and blue accents on Patty's white debutante gown.
Patty notes the party is meant to greet the king, but he has arrived early. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick click sounding as a white boot steps.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick murmur sounding as the crowd reacts.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick step sounding while Patty wonders what's happening. The red-haired girl looks utterly horrified, realizing the source of the crowd's intense reaction.
Theo is revealed standing majestically, dressed in a regal white and blue royal uniform.
Patty is shocked to realize the king's outfit perfectly matches the colors of her dress.
The silver-haired man and the red-haired girl stand facing each other in the silent ballroom.
The red-haired girl panics, realizing that she has been completely set up by the king.
Patty contemplates a polite reaction, but knows she cannot truly mask her irritation and confusion.
The silver-haired man offers a gentle smile, making Patty scream internally in absolute disbelief.
Patty apologizes to her family, feeling responsible for the immense stress the king is causing.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick reach sounding as Theo extends his hand.
Theo directly asks the red-haired girl if she would do him the honor of dancing.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick commotion sounding as the noble guests reel.
Despite her many internal complaints and protests, Patty realizes she cannot possibly refuse the king.
Patty formally accepts the invitation, placing her hand in Theo's while maintaining a polite facade.
The red-haired girl is startled to feel that the silver-haired king's hand is visibly shaking.
Patty wonders if the usually calm and cold king is actually feeling nervous during their dance.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick murmur sounding as guests question Patty's behavior.
The palace musicians begin to play a melodic tune on the violin and the cello.
Patty and Theo begin their first dance, glowing under the light of the grand ballroom.
Patty asks the silver-haired man why he went out of his way to arrange this.
Theo explains he acted because Patty mentioned she was searching for a suitable marriage partner.
The silver-haired king pulls her closer and quietly remarks that she is being very cruel. Patty is left completely bewildered, unable to understand the king's strange and sudden emotional shift.
The red-haired girl gazes at her master, questioning what he truly wants to gain. Patty considers herself a victim of the king's tyranny as they continue their elegant dance.
Theo leads the dance with grace, his white and blue attire sparkling under the chandeliers.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick pout sounding as Patty looks notably annoyed.
The red-haired girl confidently states that she is generally quite good at various physical activities.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick chuckle sounding as Theo agrees with her. Noblewomen gossip about the king's joyful laughter, fearing his deep favor for Patty portends disaster. A flashback shows Patty being casual and playful with a younger version of the king. Patty reflects on how her familiarity made her forget Theo's divine and absolute royal power.
The red-haired girl offers a bright, genuine smile as she continues to enjoy the ball.
The silver-haired king sits back on his golden throne, watching the festivities from above.
Several other debutantes in colorful gowns watch the king and Patty from a distance.
Patty looks out at the crowded ballroom, noting the shift in the guests' distant attitudes.
The red-haired girl realizes that, as expected, no other men are daring to approach her. Patty's father and brother remain slumped in exhaustion, overwhelmed by the king's presence all evening.
Patty laments that the king's favoritism has effectively destroyed her chances of finding a partner.
Patty clenches her gloved fist in a rage, calling the king a bastard under her breath.
The red-haired girl pauses for a moment as a new thought crosses her mind.
Patty clutches her necklace, admitting she feels angry but doesn't hate the king's bold actions. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick gasp sounding as Patty realizes the greetings are ending. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick click sounding as Patty steps forward in her heels.
The red-haired girl stands alone on the grand carpet, preparing to face the next noble family.
Patty maintains a cold and professional expression despite the internal turmoil of the royal ball.
Looking toward the throne, Patty vows to remember the king's mockery as he laughs with his aide. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick rustle sounding as Patty moves gracefully through the ballroom.
The red-haired girl notes with confusion that the approaching noble family is keeping their heads bowed.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick tap sounding as Patty senses something is wrong. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick whoosh sounding as the silver-haired king suddenly appears.
Patty is caught off guard as she finds Theo standing directly in front of her. The red-haired girl screams internally, overwhelmed by the king's sudden and intense physical proximity.
Looking at his subordinate, the silver-haired man offers a simple and direct confirmation.
Theo gazes at Patty with a gentle, sincere expression and tells her that she is beautiful.
Patty is left speechless, reacting with a stunned and confused question to the king's unexpected compliment.
Patty wonders if the king truly understands the heavy social implications of making such a public declaration.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick murmur sounding as noblewomen gossip about their relationship.
Patty maintains her composure, responding that she is honored while hiding her mounting anxiety.
The red-haired girl demands an explanation for the king's confusing and disruptive behavior at the ball.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick touch sounding as the king takes her hand. Patty wonders if Theo is projecting his unrequited feelings for his past love onto her.
Patty protests that the king's favoritism is actively sabotaging her chances of finding a husband.
Theo looks intensely at Patty, sharply questioning why she is still bringing up such marriage talk.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick lean sounding as Theo asks if she desires marriage. Patty explains that as a noble lady, she considers a proper marriage to be a vital responsibility. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick grip sounding as Theo firmly catches her hand. The silver-haired man brings the red-haired girl's hand to his lips for a formal kiss. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick commotion sounding as guests react to the king's proposal.
The red-haired girl looks utterly horrified, questioning what the king thinks he is doing in public. The silver-haired man gazes at Patty with a look of absolute calm devotion as he holds her.
Back in her room, the red-haired girl collapses onto her bed, reflecting on the chaotic even.
Patty notes that both her father and brother are still completely catatonic after the night's events.
The two red-haired men lament that Patty can never escape the king's overwhelming obsession.
A diagram highlights the social barrier between a countess and the king's future queen.
Patty stares at the ceiling, trying to process the impossible situation the king has forced upon her.
Patty sits up abruptly, realizing that the king's actions point toward her becoming the next queen.
The red-haired girl blushes intensely as she recalls the king's hand-kissing gesture from the ball.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick thud sounding as Patty kicks her legs in frustration.
Patty buries her face in a pillow, screaming that she does not want to return to work.
Patty imagines a life where she and Theo wake up together and share every waking moment.
A series of images show the pair eating and working side by side in constant, quiet companionship.
Patty realizes with a shock that aside from sharing a bed, their current life is already like that.
The red-haired girl wonders if this familiar domestic routine was Theo's plan from the very beginning. Patty sits in the dark, questioning her master's true intentions and her own changing feelings.
The scene shifts to the estate courtyard where a carriage is prepared for Patty's return.
The red-haired girl looks back toward her home as she prepares to depart for the palace.
The red-haired father holds his daughter's hand with a somber and deeply worried expression.
The father suggests they should all abandon their titles and flee to another kingdom to escape Theo.
The red-haired brother explains they no longer want to ignore family pain just for safety.
Patty reflects on her family's decision to stop overlooking their mutual sorrow for self-preservation.
The red-haired father asks Patty if she is truly prepared to sacrifice everything for him. Patty offers a soft smile, deeply moved by her family's unexpected and supportive resolution.
Patty insists the king is kind while her father and brother look on with concern.
The red-haired girl smiles brightly as she prepares for her return to the royal palace. Back at the palace, Patty begins packing her belongings inside her spacious and sunlit bedroom.
Patty thanks the maid who assists her, maintaining a polite and professional demeanor during work.
The red-haired girl nervously asks the maid if any rumors are circulating about her lately.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick sounding as Patty groans in embarrassment.
Patty worries that a king marrying a former orphan could severely damage Theo's royal reputation.
The maid notes the proposal was inevitable, making Patty scream in total and utter shock.
The maid explains the staff already views Patty as their future queen, leaving her speechless. Patty realizes the staff's behavior changed once she began living in the former queen's chambers.
The redhead girl berates herself for not noticing the king's long-term planning much sooner.
Patty peeks through the library doors, feeling hesitant about facing the occupants and sad.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick hum sounding as Patty eyes the ornate chair.
Roland greets Patty cheerfully, remarking that the events of the previous evening were quite remarkable. Roland admits his life is better because of them, while Patty remains skeptical of his happiness.
Patty stares at the gray-haired man, demanding to know his honest thoughts on the situation.
Roland offers a charming smile and declares that Patty and the king are a perfect match. The red-haired girl questions his assessment, still feeling uncertain about her place beside the king. Roland teases her, asking if she fears being merely a stand-in for Theo's first love.
Patty glares at him, internally complaining that the gray-haired man has a truly terrible personality.
The silver-haired king suddenly opens the door, looking regal and imposing in his red uniform.
Theo stops in his tracks, observing the close and casual interaction between Patty and Roland.
Patty and Roland turn toward the door, caught off guard by the king's sudden arrival. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick snarl sounding as Theo calls out Roland's name.
Roland quickly excuses himself, jokingly identifying himself as a meddler who needs to depart immediately.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick wave sounding as Roland bids Patty good luck.
Patty looks completely baffled by the sudden shift in the room's intense and heavy atmosphere.
The red-haired girl panics as Roland leaves, desperately wishing she could escape the room too.
Patty clutches her head in despair, screaming internally about her overwhelming desire to run away.
Theo looms over the red-haired girl, calling her name in a soft yet authoritative tone. Patty blushes furiously, feeling the king's intense gaze and physical proximity as she avoids eye contact.
The red-haired girl feels her head spinning as the king continues to lean in closer. Theo whispers into Patty's ear, noting that she has finally begun to understand his intentions.
Patty is frozen in place, her face turning bright red as the king's breath tickles her.
The silver-haired man maintains his close proximity, further flustering the speechless and overwhelmed red-haired girl.
Patty is annoyed by the king's sudden use of informal pronouns, calling his behavior incredibly cunning.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick stammer sounding as Patty mentions their duty.
Theo ignores her protest, asking if she has finally decided on her answer to his proposal.
A vision of the king in his debutante ball uniform represents the weight of his offer.
Patty hesitates to answer, struggling to find the right words while the king waits expectantly.
Patty reflects that refusing the king would likely force her into permanent exile from the country.
The red-haired girl notes that Theo is giving her a choice instead of issuing a command. Patty admits to herself that she does not actually dislike the silver-haired king at all.
Memories of Theo and a black-haired man remind Patty that Theo cares for her feelings.
The red-haired girl clenches her fist with newfound resolve, preparing to give her final answer.
Patty looks at the king, thinking about her deep desire to remain by his side. Patty observes that Theo looking away first is a rare and unexpected sight for her.
The red-haired girl reacts with wide-eyed surprise to the silver-haired king's unusually shy behavior.
Patty feels flustered and uncertain about her next move while the king remains quietly thoughtful.
Patty gazes downward, thinking about the strong bond she shared with comrades during wartime long ago.
Standing in the library, Patty formally requests more time to consider the king's marriage proposal. The red-haired girl declares that she will carefully think through their future and her feelings. Theo gives a gentle smile, encouraging Patty to take all the time she needs to decide.
Patty breathes a sigh of relief, hoping that things will finally settle down for a bit.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick step sounding as Theo declares he won't hold back.
Patty screams in shock, noting that the silver-haired king is currently way too close for comfort.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick touch sounding as Theo firmly takes her hand again. The red-haired girl is left completely flustered as the king leans in with intense, focused gaze.
Theo brings Patty's hand to his lips amidst a background of magical and fragrant blue roses.
Patty wonders what happened to Theo's innocent charm while she fumes with intense and mounting embarrassment.
The silver-haired man chuckles softly as the red-haired girl glares at him in sheer frustration.
Patty slaps her cheeks, desperately trying to stay focused and not get swept away by him.
Patty shouts at the king, demanding they return to their work duties for the funding.
Theo looks skeptical as Patty attempts to ignore her blushing face and return to her paperwork.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick thud sounding as Roland collapses through the doorway.
Patty is enraged that Roland was eavesdropping, but he finds their interactions to be highly entertaining.
The red-haired girl sighs in annoyance, telling both men to simply get back to work already.
The trio sits in the grand library, working through stocks of documents under warm and flickering candlelight.
Patty notes that she has always wanted to work for Theo despite the current romantic chaos.
Patty focuses on her tasks, reflecting that being busy sometimes helps to save one's troubled heart.
The red-haired girl looks out thoughtfully, contemplating her complicated role within the royal palace walls.
Patty's eyes narrow as she realizes that prey has finally been caught in her magical trap.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick clack sounding as Patty senses someone moving nearby.
Patty announces her departure for the day while Roland and Theo remain at the library desk.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick click sounding as the silver-haired king departs first.
Cloaked intruders are snared in glowing magic barriers that Patty has set throughout the palace grounds.
Patty spots 4 intruders and confidently prepares to deal with them by herself without any help.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick clang sounding as Patty effortlessly defeats the intruders.
A close-up shows Patty's hand holding a small, ornate silver device decorated with a red gem.
Patty blows into the device, releasing a powerful ripple of magical sound through the palace corridor.
An officer comments on the large hall while Patty stands over the defeated, cloaked intruders.
A character profile identifies the brown-haired man in uniform as Army Officer Ignacio of the Marquisate. Patty bows politely and apologizes to Ignacio for the trouble the intruders have caused him today.
Narration explains Ignacio taught Theo sword fighting while the king was protected at the Marquisate.
Ignacio questions her secrecy, but Patty fears the king would scold her for her dangerous actions.
Her attention is taken by a sudden quick sigh sounding as Ignacio laments taking her credit.
Ignacio prepares to tie up the intruders while Patty stands by in the quiet palace hallway.
The red-haired girl offers a soft smile as she observes the officer's efficient and professional work.
Patty says she will leave the rest to Ignacio and prepares to head back to bed.
Back in her room, Patty lies on her bed, exhausted after the long evening's hidden duties.
Looking up, Patty realizes she is sleeping in the king and queen's massive shared royal bed. Patty vividly imagines an intimate moment with Theo as they lie together in the grand bed.
The redhead girl blushes intensely, her eyes swirling in a state of utter and complete confusion.
Patty bolts upright and screams in panic as she tries to banish the embarrassing romantic thoughts.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick step sounding as Patty hears a mysterious noise.
Patty wonders if more assassins have arrived as she senses someone lurking outside her bedroom window.
Patty reacts with surprise while looking out the window of her lavish and moonlit chambers.
A round white bird wearing an ornate blue bow carries a small rolled-up letter.
Patty notes that the messenger bird looks identical to a bird Theo cared for long ago.
The red-haired girl observes a letter tightly secured beneath the feet of the small white bird.
An unrelated boy and girl appear in a promotional illustration for an online translation group.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick flap sounding as Patty opens the large window.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick chirp sounding as the bird lands in Patty's hand. Patty marvels at the bird's appearance, recalling how similar it looks to Theo's childhood pet.
Patty fondly remembers a moment from 10 years ago when Theo picked up a small bird.
Patty blinks in confusion as she begins to wonder about the current purpose of the bird.
Patty asks the chirping bird if it is actually the silver-haired king's magical animal familiar.
Patty reflects on the king's sentimental nature for creating a familiar based on his childhood pet.
Memories reveal that Theo left his bird with a chef before departing for war long ago.
Patty sits at her desk, wondering why the king sent a letter after their recent meeting.
Patty holds the envelope formally addressed to her as Lady Patty Alvain in elegant handwriting.
Patty admires Theo's elegant handwriting, jokingly contrasting it with her own messy and unique scrawl.
Patty recalls Theo's polite yet questionable compliment about her energetic handwriting during their time together. Theo's letter explains he is writing because Roland suggested it as a proper way to court. Patty realizes Roland was meddling again and suspects the king took the advice far too literally.
Patty critiques the king's blunt opening line while she continues to read the surprising letter.
The red-haired girl is caught completely off guard by the king's sudden and sincere gratitude. Theo's letter describes how Patty's morning energy makes him feel alive, which she finds incredibly intense. Theo confesses that Patty's presence makes meals delicious and gives him a true reason to rule.
Patty blushes furiously upon realizing that the king has written her a genuine and romantic letter.
The silver-haired king finishes his letter with a sincere plea for Patty to stay forever. Patty holds the letter tightly against her chest, feeling deeply moved by Theo's heartfelt words.
A soft and genuine smile forms on Patty's face as she reflects on the king's depth.
Patty feels overwhelmed by the king's romantic advances, noting he's approaching from many angles.
Patty panics over her reply, admitting she has always been terrible at handling romantic relationships.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick thump, sounding as Patty notices more text. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick thud, sounding as Patty reacts to a request.
The red-haired girl feels deflated when the romantic letter ends with a sudden business assignment.
Despite her initial frustration, Patty decides that she really should write a reply to the king. The red-haired girl sits at her desk, staring blankly at the quill in her hand.
The silver-haired king offers a gentle and satisfied smile while holding a letter in his office. Roland enters the room and bluntly asks the king why he is wearing such a smile.
Theo announces that he received a reply from Patty, catching Roland's attention with the mention.
The king reminds a confused Roland that he was the one who suggested exchanging letters.
A flashback shows Roland casually suggesting letters as a safe way for the king to approach.
Roland is shocked that the king actually followed his advice and sent a letter yesterday.
Roland laughs hysterically at the king's sincerity while Theo fumes silently at his friend's disrespect.
Theo explains that he wrote about his daily gratitude and requested Patty accompany him on inspection.
Roland points out the message sounds like business, then asks about Patty's formal and professional response. Roland collapses in laughter at the purely professional exchange between the supposedly romantic pair. The silver-haired king looks deeply annoyed as he watches Roland continue to mock his attempt. Roland notes that Theo is a good boss as he would have been beheaded previously. Roland offers a playful wink, enjoying his role as the king's informal and irreverent advisor. A small, genuine smile tugs at the king's lips despite his friend's constant and annoying teasing. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick slide sounding as Patty handles the laugh.
Patty writes a formal note of gratitude, thanking the king for allowing her to remain nearby.
Theo smiles gently at the letter, his silver hair catching the soft morning light.
The silver-haired king asks Roland if he thinks Patty is finally falling for him.
Roland offers a skeptical look, noting he will agree if that's what the king believes. Roland reacts with utter shock, clearly finding the king's romantic assumption to be completely ridiculous.
The brown-haired man marvels at the king's changed personality, crediting it to the red-haired girl.
Theo notes the lack of a compliment while Roland continues laughing hysterically in the background. Roland privately considers that despite their tragic pasts, both Theo and Patty remain good-hearted people. Memories show that neither Theo nor Patty allowed their personal tragedies to twist their characters.
Roland departs with a playful thought, noting this is exactly why he pities the king.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick clack sounding as Roland walks away from Theo.
The royal carriage travels through the lush forest, guarded by several officers on golden brown horses. The trio sits inside the carriage, traveling toward their next inspection under Theo's formal supervision. Patty gazes out the carriage window, her green eyes reflecting the vibrant forest scenery passing by.
Watching the guards outside, Patty wistfully admits to herself that she would prefer traveling by horse.
Theo asks what's wrong, leading Patty to admit she misses the freedom of riding horses.
Roland is surprised Patty knows how to ride, causing the red-haired girl to panic internally.
Patty reminds herself that she is currently supposed to be a doted-upon and delicate noblewoman.
Patty quickly claims she only learned the basics of riding as part of her formal education.
The silver-haired king smiles warmly, offering to personally teach Patty how to ride in the future.
Patty is delighted, realizing her family cannot complain if horse riding is an official royal order.
Patty looks at Theo, privately longing to experience another long journey by his side once again.
A transitional moment recalls how Patty used to drag the silver-haired boy everywhere in their youth. A flashback shows the young pair racing, with a weary Theo questioning Patty's incredible stamina. The young red-haired girl offers a radiant and playful smile during their childhood horse riding adventures. The two children stand in a sun-drenched field, enjoying a brief moment of peace and companionship. Back in the present, Patty smiles softly as the carriage ride brings back cherished childhood memories. Patty wonders if Theo still enjoys any freedom now that he carries the weight of kingship. Theo reacts with subtle surprise as he senses the red-haired girl's intense and lingering gaze. A close-up reveals Theo's ears turning bright red as he attempts to look away from Patty. Patty contemplates revealing her true identity to the king to finally ease his lingering sense of guilt.
The red-haired girl looks out with a determined gaze, weighing the consequences of telling Theo the truth.
Patty's hands remain tightly clasped as she considers how the truth might change her current relationship.
Roland changes the subject, pointing out a detail that catches the silver-haired king's immediate attention.
Theo asks for clarification while a tiny, confused chibi version of Patty appears in the corner.
Roland mentions Patty's future duties as queen, sending the red-haired girl into a state of shock.
Patty realizes that plans for her future are becoming far too concrete for her current comfort. Roland remarks that the king cannot cling to a lost love forever, shocking the red-haired girl. Roland finds it agreeable that Theo is training a girl who resembles his lost childhood love. Patty snaps that she is not being raised by him, while a confused Roland blinks twice. The silver-haired king remains silent and stoic, completely ignoring the bickering between Patty and Roland.
The carriage atmosphere turns awkward as chibi versions of Roland and Patty sit in sullen silence.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick neigh sounding as the horses react to an obstacle.
Theo senses something is wrong as the horses become agitated and noisy outside the royal carriage. A powerful and hostile magical aura suddenly erupts, startling both Theo and the red-haired girl inside. A blinding beam of light slices through the carriage, causing Patty to recoil in sheer shock.
Patty realizes they are being attacked by a magic sword and incredibly skilled wind-based magical energy.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick crash sounding as the carriage is violently torn apart.
Patty realizes with horror that Theo has been isolated and is now standing completely alone outside. A group of cloaked intruders surrounds the silver-haired king while Patty looks on in mounting panic.
Patty reacts with surprise as a cloaked intruder suddenly looms directly behind her in an ambush. A large man with a purple arm tattoo holds a sharp knife against Patty's throat.
The silver-haired king's eye narrows as he stares at the intruder with intense, glowing fury.
Theo looks absolutely livid as he confronts the man holding the red-haired girl hostage. The captor reveals a magical bomb within his body that triggers if his heart stops. Patty is horrified to realize the man intends to use himself as a living bomb.
The red-haired girl realizes that any attack from Theo will result in her own death.
Patty desperately contemplates using her own magic to create a barrier and survive the explosion.
A decorative frame captures Patty's past and present identities, illustrating her complex internal struggle.
Theo's attention is taken by a sudden, quick rasp sounding as he demands Patty's release.
The intruder orders the silver-haired king to drop his sword and dispel his magic shield.
Theo slowly lowers his weapon, showing he is willing to comply to save Patty's life.
Patty is stunned that the king would risk himself for the sake of a lady-in-waiting. The red-haired girl wonders why Theo is prioritizing her life over the safety of the kingdom.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick click sounding as Theo dispels his magic shield.
The silver-haired king stands completely unprotected, awaiting the enemy's next move with calm resolve. Patty watches in pure terror as the man she loves throws away his only protection.
The tattooed captor laughs triumphantly, believing he has finally secured a total and final victory. A massive surge of dark magical energy erupts, engulfing the battlefield in a violent purple glow.
Patty recognizes the devastating spell as the same magic that previously targeted Theo in public.
The red-haired girl fears Theo cannot survive a direct hit from such high-level magical energy.
The intruder sneers at the king, warning him that any resistance will cost Patty's life.
Patty frantically searches for a way to intervene and save Theo from certain magical destruction. The silver-haired king collapses onto the leaf-strewn ground after taking the full force of the attack. Patty feels a brief moment of hope as she realizes Theo is still breathing despite the head.
A memory of Roland reminds Patty that love and precious things are often exploited as weaknesses.
Theo stares down the encroaching darkness, refusing to yield even while he is visibly injured. Patty accepts the painful truth that her presence is the only thing preventing Theo from fighting.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick pulse sounding as Patty's hidden power begins awakening.
Burning with a fierce new determination, Patty vows she will never be Theo's fatal weakness. Patty's resolve manifests as a radiant aura of flames that begins to consume her surroundings.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick flare sounding as a massive fire pillar erupts.
The tattooed man is caught completely off guard as the hostage suddenly becomes a powerful threat.
Patty strikes with precision, using her flames to break the intruder's hold and free herself completely.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick thump sounding as the defeated captor hits ground.
Theo watches in silence as the red-haired girl reveals her incredible and long-hidden magical strength. Magical sparks fall like rain as the immediate area is cleared of the hostile magical energy.
The remaining cloaked enemies scream in terror as they realize the tide has completely turned.
Patty retrieves a weapon from the ground, her movements sharp and filled with a warrior's grace.
The red-haired girl lunges at the remaining attackers, determined to end the threat once and for all.
A wide arc of flames follows Patty's blade as she cuts through the ranks of enemies. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick snap sounding as Patty's current sword shatters completely.
Patty tosses the broken hilt aside, annoyed that the standard weapon couldn't withstand her immense power.
Theo's personal sword lies nearby on the ground, glowing faintly amidst the debris of the battle.
Patty realizes that only the king's high-quality blade is capable of channeling her intense magical energy.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick dash sounding as Patty grabs Theo's legendary weapon. Patty and Theo stand back to back, a formidable pair ready to face any who remain standing. The red-haired girl prepares to unleash a final, decisive blow with the king's sword in hand.
Theo offers a subtle, knowing look as he observes Patty finally fighting at her full potential.
The silver-haired king's eyes glow with a deadly light, signaling the end of the hostile encounter.
With a single terrifying glare, Theo instantly paralyzes and defeats the remaining members of the group.
A narrative text block notes that on the battlefield, this kind of death is considered merciful.
Patty delivers a powerful blow with her sword, putting an end to the remaining cloaked attackers.
The silver-haired king and the red-haired girl stand together as the swirling magical dust begins settling.
Theo gazes at Patty from behind, his expression unreadable as the heat of battle slowly fades away.
The silver-haired king looks directly at the red-haired girl and quietly calls out the name Patty.
Theo reaches out, but Patty snaps back that he is an idiot while he looks on confused.
Patty yells at Theo, asking what he thinks he's doing and if he wants to die.
The red-haired girl screams that he is the king and must get his priorities straight immediately.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick gasp sounding as Theo reflexively offers his sincere apologies.
The silver-haired king pulls Patty into a sudden tight hug as white lilies bloom in the background.
Patty's eyes widen in shock and she begins blushing while a single word, "huh," appears above. While holding her close, the silver-haired king leans in and softly whispers the word captain to her. Patty realizes she messed up by yelling at him like she was still his superior military officer.
Narrative text explains that Patty is supposed to be a commoner orphan without any special magical powers.
A chibi version shows Theo grabbing Patty as she claims she doesn't know what he means.
The silver-haired king stares at the red-haired girl with a knowing and incredibly gentle, calm smile.
A tiny chibi Patty sweat drops as she nervously apologizes, claiming she did not mean any harm.
Theo reveals he has actually known the truth for quite some time, leaving Patty completely stunned.
Theo asks if he can stop pretending not to know, while Patty screams out in absolute shock.
Patty realizes she was trying so hard to act like a child while Theo saw her normally. Patty's face turns bright red as she realizes she was a grown officer pretending to be a kid.
A chibi Patty hides her face in embarrassment while telling Theo he should have told her sooner.
Her attention is taken by sudden, quick and guh soundings from the defeated intruders on the ground.
Patty tells the king they must get the situation under control before dealing with anything else personally.
A flashback notes they must capture the assassins and rescue the knights to damage the Queen Dowager.
Patty tells Theo not to make that face and that calling the king Theo is definitely wrong.
The silver-haired king closes his eyes, regaining his stoic and regal composure after the emotional outburst.
The royal guards secure the area and apprehend the surviving intruders near the wrecked carriage wreckage.
Theo and Patty stand side by side, observing the aftermath of the ambush in the forest clearing.
The silver-haired king approaches a grounded soldier and asks the brown-haired man if Roland is all right.
Theo asks about the captive, but Roland reports that the tattooed man unfortunately took his own life.
Patty looks frustrated, thinking the man was the most important person to capture for information.
Theo simply says he sees while the brown-haired man and Patty stand behind him in the forest.
The brown-haired man named Roland looks exhausted, with dirt and a smudge visible on his face.
A narrative text states they decided to return to the palace with the assassins and injured guards.
Patty realizes they must share a horse because the carriage is broken, making her feel quite tense.
Her attention is taken by a sudden quick flutter sounding as Theo gets very close to her.
Theo remarks that is his name now, as the pair rides together on the golden brown horse.
The silver-haired king looks down with a soft, affectionate expression as he rests near Patty's rear.
A chibi memory shows a young Theo with dog ears happily shouting "Captain" at the young girl.
Theo asks if she will listen without getting angry, but Patty says it depends on the topic.
Theo promises not to get mad if she confesses what she did, making Patty look quite nervous.
The silver-haired king admits he knew there was a high possibility of an attack during this trip.
The red-haired girl listens intently, thinking to herself that his reasoning makes perfect sense in context.
Narrative text explains Theo sensed the Queen Dowager's desperation and expected a disguised attack outside the palace.
Theo's plan was to flush the enemies out and take them all down together in one move.
Patty thinks about how the king's prediction came true and considers the noble blood of the mage. Theo explains he was trying to protect her and apologizes that the situation turned out this way.
Leaning in, Theo asks Patty to please stop charging into dangerous situations every time something goes wrong.
Theo whispers that he wishes she would understand the pain of the person who is being protected.
Theo's hand rests gently on Patty's as he apologizes for putting her in a dangerous situation.
Patty admits she would likely rush out again if it looked like he was about to get hurt. Theo pulls her close, whispering that her selflessness is exactly why he cannot help but love her.
Patty looks away with a bright red blush, completely flustered by the king's sudden romantic confession.
Her attention is taken by a sudden quick peck sounding as Theo kisses her neck quite tenderly.
Patty reacts with shock to the kiss while Theo points out the royal castle finally coming into view.
The grand, sun-drenched royal palace comes into full view as the group finally completes their journey home.
Theo continues to hold Patty's hand firmly, his fingers intertwining with hers as they enter the castle.
The silver-haired king carries the red-haired girl bridal style through a garden blooming with white flowers.
Her attention is taken by a sudden quick tap sounding as a man with glasses watches them. A narrative text block highlights Patty's internal scream, wondering what in the world the king is doing.
Patty yells at the silver-haired king, asking what he is doing in a state of high alarm.
Her attention is taken by a sudden quick click sounding as Theo refuses to let her go. Theo looks at Patty with a warm, gentle smile as the light of the room surrounds them.
The red-haired woman requests that Theo speak to her informally as he usually does.
Theo agrees to her request and suggests they compare their notes regarding past events. Calling him by name, Patty confirms her agreement to his proposal of comparing notes.
Patty suggests her rejuvenation occurred because Theo used excessively effective healing magic on her.
Following a past battle, the young woman's body regressed to age 7.
Patty laughs about surviving, while Theo agrees it is fortunate she did not become an infant.
Patty wonders aloud if repeated use of such magic could grant a person immortality. Theo stares down in silence, contemplating the implications of her suggestion about magic.
Theo explains the miracle resulted from exhausting his magic and their unique elemental compatibility.
Theo admits to Patty that he doubts he could ever repeat such a magical feat.
Looking at her reflection in her tea, Patty reflects on the meaning of a miracle.
Theo advises Patty to keep her rejuvenation secret to avoid causing widespread social trouble.
Widespread public knowledge of rejuvenation magic would inevitably trigger significant and needless global conflicts.
Patty explains she was taken in by others because she appeared to be a child. Patty clarifies she reconstructed her history using information from everyone who knew her and Theo.
Soldiers arrived to rescue them, leading to Theo's enlistment and Patty being sent to an orphanage.
Patty explains her father adopted her from the orphanage because she looked exactly like herself.
Theo grits his teeth, appearing visibly upset by the details of Patty's past struggles.
Patty tells Theo she felt more loved as Patty than she ever did as Patricia.
Theo asks if she has any intention of revealing her true identity to her family.
Gazing into her tea, Patty refuses, declaring that her former identity as Patricia is dead.
Patty explains her revenge is forcing her family to live with the guilt of her death.
The two sit together in a shared moment of silence following her heavy confession.
Turning to Theo, the woman firmly asserts that her identity is now exclusively Patty.
Theo clenches his fist tightly against his leg, struggling with the weight of her words.
Speaking with sudden intensity, Theo calls her by her former name, Patricia, startling her. A close-up of the red-haired woman's eyes shows her shock at hearing her old name.
Theo reminisces about a time when he was hopelessly in love with her in the past.
Theo smiles at Patty, looking at her with affection as he reveals his old feelings. Blushing deeply, Patty admits she never suspected he harbored such strong romantic feelings for her.
Theo explains the entire squad knew his feelings while Patty remains oblivious to the soldiers' encouragement.
Theo admits he intended to confess his feelings only after successfully landing a blow in a duel.
Looking at his hand, Theo remains lost in thought about his past struggles to confess.
Patty apologizes profusely to Theo for her lack of awareness regarding his long-held romantic feelings.
Patty wonders how she would have reacted to his confession if she had known sooner.
Theo challenges Patty to a future match, joking that he would easily win against her current body.
Patty boasts about her secret training and her success in capturing assassins for the Royal Guard.
Theo reacts with surprise and a dark intensity upon learning of her secret combat activities.
Patty admits she coerced the Royal Guard captain into keeping her secret training a private matter.
Theo leans against her and remarks that Pati is truly an exceptional and surprising person.
Theo apologizes for his reaction and asks Pati not to be angry with him. Theo holds Pati's hand close to his face, showing his vulnerability and deep affection. Amidst a backdrop of flowers, Theo pulls Pati into a tender and intimate embrace. Leaning close to her ear, Theo explicitly confesses his love for her during their embrace. Theo declares that he has thought of her constantly from the moment they first met. Pati blushes and softly confirms her feelings while resting her head against Theo's chest.
Theo gives Pati an unexpected treasure as he pulls her into a deep embrace on the sofa.
Pati asks Theo to wait a little longer before she makes any final decisions. Pati explains that she cannot accept the title of queen without serious and careful consideration. Theo sighs, noting that Pati is unwilling to simply follow the path he suggested.
The red-haired woman admits she is only halfway prepared for what lies ahead for them.
Pati leans in and tenderly kisses the white-haired man on his forehead in a loving gesture. Looking at the king with deep affection, the red-haired woman offers a warm, radiant smile. The woman gently cradles Theo's face in her hands, holding his gaze with great tenderness.
Theo blushes intensely as Petite continues her intimate and bold physical display of deep affection.
Laughing softly, the woman expresses her happiness in this quiet, peaceful moment they share together. Roland observes the couple from a distance, noting that things are proceeding exactly as expected.
The brown-haired man reflects on Pati's true identity, confirming she is indeed Lady Patricia.
Roland recalls Petit's mysterious past, remembering her arrival at the orphanage with no prior history. Looking contemplative, Roland admits he originally investigated Pati to use her for his own ends. Roland notes that Theo's obsession with the girl who resembles his first love is quite strange.
Once invincible, the king has become vulnerable like a mortal due to his love for Pati.
Roland realizes the weakness he intended to exploit has blossomed into a powerful, unbreakable bond. Lying on the ground, the brown-haired man reflects on the unexpected turn of recent events. Roland considers the Queen Dowager's inevitable fury after his failure to kill those hostile to her. Smirking with dark intent, Roland contemplates his next move as shadows swirl around his hands.
The scene shifts to a high-angle view of a luxurious drawing room containing a piano and sofas.
Pati sits on the edge of a large orange sofa, looking incredibly tense and nervous in the room.
Theo reaches out and places his hand on the lid of a decorative black and gold teapot.
Theo remarks that this feels nostalgic as he begins to personally prepare some tea for the red-haired girl.
Pati remembers him serving tea as a subordinate and wonders if having the king do this is all right.
Theo offers the steaming cup of tea to Pati, his gesture humble despite his high royal status.
Theo asks Pati if she can speak to him casually whenever they are alone together like this.
Pati gazes up at the king, holding the warm teacup while processing his request for familiarity.
Watching the happy couple, Roland wonders what he should do with the dangerous information he possesses.
The man lingers in the shadows, deeply contemplating the weight of the choice he must make.
Roland admits that despite the gravity of the situation, he is actually having quite a bit of fun.
Roland observes how Theo has become more human while watching Pati work tirelessly at her desk.
Roland reflects on hiding Pati's combat skills from the Queen Dowager simply to see what happened.
The man acknowledges that correctly reporting her abilities would have guaranteed the Queen Dowager's success.
Roland decides to maintain a facade of innocence while the world learns of Petit's hidden power.
A close-up of Roland's eye reveals the calculated and cold focus behind his deceptive persona.
Clutching his head, Roland is momentarily overwhelmed by the weight of his own secret plans. Narrative text explains Roland's royal blood, born as an illegitimate son of the former king. Roland's mother, fearing for her life, fled the ruthless queen's court before his secret birth.
The pregnant woman fled into the night, seeking sanctuary for her unborn child far from court.
Despite her efforts, the newborn infant clearly displayed the silver hair characteristic of the royal line.
Young Roland grew up with his hair dyed to hide his true identity from the world.
Their peace was shattered when Marquis Alvarez discovered Roland's existence and reported him to the Green.
Armed soldiers arrived and forcibly separated Roland from his mother, capturing them both for the throne.
Roland became the Marquis's adopted son and pawn, with his mother held hostage to ensure obedience.
Treated with coldness and cruelty by his adoptive family, Roland lived a lonely and isolated life.
As a child, Roland found a kindred spirit in Theo, another child with no palace standing.
Their bond was broken when Theo was sent away to war, leaving Roland completely alone again.
For years, Roland struggled to survive in a hostile world, always walking a dangerous, metaphorical tightrope.
Political upheaval eventually led to Theo's rise, crowning him as the new, undisputed king.
The Queen Dowager sent Roland to serve as Theo's aide, intending to use him for revenge. Roland feared Theo would kill him if his ulterior motives were ever discovered by the king.
To Roland's absolute shock, the newly crowned King Theo recognized him after all those long years.
Stunned and sweating, the man can hardly believe that the king remembered their childhood connection.
Roland resolves that while he acts as a pawn, he will not be a mindless one.
Looking at Theo, the aide reflects on the fact that the king is actually his half-brother.
The brown-haired man hopes he can continue to dodge suspicion and keep his true motives hidden.
Roland remains trapped in his role as long as his mother is held hostage by the brain.
King Theo stares forward with a cold, determined gaze, his mind clearly set on his future.
Sitting before the council, King Theo formally declares his intention to make Pati his royal queen.
Theo explains he made the declaration before the council and met 0 objections, shocking his companions.
When Pati protests about his lack of patience, Theo notes they are at least engaged now.
Theo suggests breaking the engagement if necessary, but Petit dismisses his proposal as complete nonsense.
Roland notes the king's stubbornness while Petit groans in frustration over the unwanted engagement.
The white-haired king advises Pati that it is time she prepared for their future.
Roland looks slightly unsettled as the tension between the king and the girl continues.
Roland laughs nervously while Theo and Pati exchange a silent, questioning glance in the library.
Pati reflects on the sudden turn her life has taken following the official engagement announcement.
Looking at the staff, the girl notes how naturally the palace accepted her new status.
Gritting her teeth, the red-haired woman realizes she has fallen directly into Theo's clever plan.
Only Pati's father and brother remain shocked as Theo sits regally upon his golden throne.
Marquise Alvarez pleads with the king to allow for a long engagement period for family.
Pati realizes that becoming queen will make visiting her family home a much rarer occurrence.
Theo internally mocks the Marquis for treasuring an adopted daughter while neglecting his biological one.
The Marquis and his son look down in shame, clearly burdened by their shared past.
Looking at the king, Pati softly agrees with the sentiment expressed by her worried father.
Clenching his suit, the Marquis admits they failed to bring happiness to their first daughter.
The Marquis declares his firm intention to live without any further regrets regarding his family.
Both red-haired men stand together, showing a rare moment of vulnerability before the royal throne.
Tears well up in Pati's eyes as she witnesses her father's genuine and painful remorse.
Overcome with emotion, Pati pulls her father and brother into a sudden and tight embrace.
Startled by the sudden physical affection, the Marquis and his son react with utter confusion.
Crying against her father's chest, the girl finds comfort in the family she once resented. From his throne, King Theo watches the family reunion with a quiet and observant gaze.
Theo grants their request, decreeing the marriage will only happen after Pati turns 18.
The girl stands between her father and brother as they prepare to depart the palace.
A horse-drawn carriage waits in the courtyard to take the Marquis and his son home. Theo asks Pati if he made the right decision regarding her family's request for time. Smiling warmly, the woman tells the king she is now certain of her family's love. Looking at her father, Pati feels her past suffering is finally being acknowledged through his regret. Pati admits she hasn't forgiven everything but might reveal her true identity to her father.
The white-haired king looks at her with a gentle, loving smile as they talk privately. Kneeling before her, the king prepares to repeat his sincere proposal to the red-haired woman.
On one knee, Theo formally asks Pati to stay by his side as his queen. A close-up of the king's face shows his deep sincerity and devotion to the woman. Blushing and smiling, Pati looks down at the man who has finally captured her heart.
The red-haired woman accepts his proposal, her eyes filled with newfound happiness and romantic resolve.
The couple shares a lighthearted and joyful moment together, their bond stronger than ever before.
Looking into each other's eyes, the king and his future queen share a silent promise. Theo pulls Pati into a passionate embrace, sealing their engagement with a deep, romantic kiss. Leaning against one another, the couple reflects on the surprising happiness of their second life.
Pati mentions she has a request for the man who unilaterally declared their royal engagement.
Leaning close, the red-haired woman whispers her secret request directly into the king's ear.
Theo smiles knowingly after hearing her words, his eyes glinting with amusement and high anticipation.
The scene shifts to an open field where Theo and Roland stand under the sun.
Tightening his gauntlets, the king prepares himself for a long-awaited physical match in the clearing.
Roland informs the king that the area is secure for him to train without interruption.
Taking his leave, the brown-haired aide encourages the king to enjoy his private training session.
A firm step onto the sandy ground signals the arrival of a new, formidable challenger.
Theo's eyes widen in surprise as he catches sight of a familiar red-haired figure approaching.
Dressed in her full military uniform, Pati stands ready for the duel Theo previously suggested.
Pati remarks on her outfit while Theo stares, stunned by her sudden and impressive appearance. Theo smiles warmly while narrative text reflects on the bittersweet nature of long-held memories.
A dual depiction showcases Pati standing tall and confident in her formal military uniform.
Theo notes she could wear her uniform daily while Pati adjusts her gauntlet with determination. Pati feels the crushing weight of her new titles as heavy boulders upon her shoulders.
The white-haired king watches her with a serious, observant gaze as they speak privately together.
Leaning in close, Pati whispers her secret request to the king while holding his hand.
Narrative text explains the couple borrowed the royal army's training grounds for a private duel. Standing in the center of the clearing, the two prepare to begin their long-awaited sparring match.
Looking at him, Pati asks if he has wielded a sword since regaining his youth.
The white-haired man confirms her suspicion with a calm and knowing smile during their conversation.
Pati recalls her past claim of wanting a normal life while she grips her hilt.
Narrative text reveals that despite her past words, her soul still deeply loves the sword. Brandishing her blade, the woman admits her only focus now is taking down her opponent. Observing her enthusiasm, Theo notes with amusement that his partner has not changed at all.
The king offers a soft smile, clearly moved by her consistent and fiery fighting spirit.
Narrative text explains that she has prioritized refining her swordsmanship over simply relying on magic.
Pumping her fist, Patti enthusiastically declares that a sound body houses sound magic for everyone.
Flashbacks show Patti relentlessly drilling Theo until he collapsed, all while she enjoyed his struggle. The scene shifts to the ground as the combatants prepare to engage in their duel.
Holding her sword ready, the red-haired woman looks toward her opponent with intense, focused determination.
Theo signals the start of the match, his eyes narrowing with newfound focus and skill.
A powerful clash of steel rings out as their blades meet with incredible, spark-inducing force.
Patti realizes she must reinforce her trained muscles to keep up with the king's strength.
Clashing blades, she strategizes to parry his attacks while waiting for the perfect counter-opening.
Gritting her teeth, the woman shows signs of physical strain as the intense spar continues. Patti is caught off guard by the king's explosive speed as he moves across the field.
Tracking his movements, the red-haired woman remains alert and ready for his next lightning-fast strike.
Lunging forward, Patti launches a high overhead strike with both hands firmly on her sword's hilt.
Theo remains perfectly composed, his eyes tracking her every move with a cold, analytical precision.
Their swords meet once more in a blinding flash of light as the duel reaches its peak.
With a swift motion, the king successfully disarms Patti, sending her sword spinning into the air.
The discarded blade plunges deep into the sandy ground, marking the sudden end of the match.
Standing over her, Theo watches the red-haired woman with a look of quiet, triumphant satisfaction.
Breathless and wide-eyed, Patti stares in total shock at the man who has finally surpassed her.
Falling to her knees, the woman screams in pure frustration over her unexpected and sudden defeat. Patti reflects on her easy life while Theo was busy training relentlessly to reach this level.
The white-haired king watches his fiancée's dramatic display of competitive rage with a neutral expression.
Looking down at her, Theo proudly declares he has finally taken a point from her.
Growling with competitive fury, Patti looks up at him with tears of frustration in her eyes.
Reaching down, the king offers his hand to help the defeated woman back to her feet.
Pulling her close, Theo tenderly kisses Patti's gloved hand as a sign of his deep devotion.
A close-up of Patti's face reveals her utter surprise at the king's sudden romantic gesture.
Standing over her, Theo requests a reward for his first victory over the former captain.
Theo gently touches her face, his gaze softening as he looks at the woman he loves.
Leaning in, the white-haired man prepares to share an intimate and romantic moment with her.
Theo pulls the blushing woman into a tight embrace, ignoring her lingering frustration from the duel.
A close-up of Patti's eye captures her racing heart as she is overwhelmed by the moment.
Surrounded by a frame of roses, the couple shares a deep and passionate engagement kiss.
Still steaming with embarrassment and heat, the woman groans while Theo stays teasingly close to her.
Looking at her with love, Theo notes his devotion has remained unchanged for over 10 years.
Theo pulls a blushing Patti into a warm embrace, overwhelming her with sudden and intense affection. Theo gazes lovingly at the red-haired woman as the romantic atmosphere between them turns magical. A young Theobald walks through the palace, reflecting on being forced into military service by the king.
The young prince is surprised to learn his new military superior is a woman named Patricia.
Standing among white flowers, the young prince looks stoic and serious in his formal military uniform.
Theobald suspects the queen is trying to sideline him by assigning him to this specific magic squad.
He sighs, assuming a female boss will be a burden, interested only in finding a marriage partner.
The prince is suddenly transfixed by the sight of long, vibrant red hair blowing past him. Patricia Alvain makes a striking entrance, looking radiant and authoritative in her formal military attire.
Patricia introduces herself to the prince, formally declaring that she will be his new superior officer.
Theobald blushes deeply, captivated by the woman's beauty as his initial prejudices begin to melt.
The young prince looks away in embarrassment, unable to maintain eye contact with the stunning captain.
Patricia notices his reaction, her own face flushing slightly as she prepares to interact with him.
The red-haired woman offers a gentle, radiant smile that completely catches the young prince off guard. Theobald reacts with flustered confusion as Patricia reaches out to touch his face quite familiarly.
Smiling warmly, Patricia holds the young prince's face, establishing a connection that will last a lifetime.
Narrative text reflects on Theo's tragic childhood, describing a life filled with sorrow rather than pride. Theo's mother, a lady-in-waiting, caught the king's eye, but her beauty led to a difficult fate.
Due to a mana imbalance during pregnancy, Theo's mother tragically lost her life, giving him birth.
As talented royal children began to mysteriously disappear, the cold queen watched over the court.
Fearing for his own life, the young prince realized he might eventually be targeted for elimination.
Theo survived by appearing weak and untalented, living as a worthless existence with barely any magic.
To stay alive in the dangerous palace, the young boy learned to stay quiet and hidden.
In the vast, lonely palace, only one person ever bothered to speak to the isolated young prince.
Sunlight filters through the trees onto an empty garden bench where the prince often finds solitude.
Theo's older sister, Isabel, approaches him on the bench, kindly offering him some delicious pastries.
Isabel is revealed to be a gentle woman with dark hair, freckles, and a kind heart.
The young prince smiles brightly as he accepts a treat from the only person who loves him.
Despite being her daughter, the queen despised Isabel for her looks, and other siblings bullied her.
While eating together, Theo informs his sister of his firm intention to one day leave the palace.
Isabel sadly agrees, noting that there is truly no place for people like them in this home.
Looking at her, Theo internally prays that his kind sister will find someone who sees her worth.
The siblings reflect on their shared loneliness, feeling like meaningless existences that nobody in the palace needs.
The scene shifts to a bright garden party venue where the royal court is gathered together.
Noble women sit at a decorated table enjoying refreshments while ignoring the young prince nearby.
Other children play and run happily through the palace gardens, fully included in the festivities.
Standing alone by a fence, Theo watches the others with a silent and deeply sorrowful expression.
People whisper behind his back, avoiding him to stay on the queen's good side and avoid trouble.
Frustration boils over as the young prince grits his teeth against the constant rejection and isolation.
Overwhelmed by the social pressure, Theo runs away into the trees, wishing to avoid everyone's gaze.
Hiding behind a large tree trunk, the young prince cautiously peeks out at his surroundings.
A close-up of Theo's eye reveals his surprise as he spots someone else hiding in the woods.
Sitting quietly under a tree, a brown-haired boy with green eyes appears just as lonely as Theo.
Theo approaches the boy asking what he is doing there, only to hear he has nowhere else.
Realizing they share the same loneliness, the prince asks the brown-haired boy for his name.
Looking up with a somber expression, the young boy introduces himself to the prince as Roland Alvarez.
The white-haired prince listens intently as Roland explains his own reasons for being an outcast.
Roland mentions his family's status in the country makes others want nothing to do with him.
Theo admits he is also an outcast prince from a different mother who never interacts with anyone.
Roland looks surprised by the revelation as the prince formally introduces himself as Theobald. The brown-haired boy suggests that since they are both outcasts, they should spend time together.
The white-haired prince happily accepts the offer, and the two boys decide to become friends.
Theo looks at Roland with curiosity as they prepare to play together in the woods.
The two boys engage in a playful duel using wooden sticks while enjoying the afternoon sun.
Standing under a massive tree, the young prince points toward the upper branches while talking to Roland.
Theo and Roland find a moment of peace while sitting together on a large tree branch.
A collection of memories shows the two boys growing closer as they share their lonely childhoods. Theo smiles up at Roland, who is climbing higher up the massive trunk of the tree.
A sudden slip causes a hand to lose its grip on the rough bark of the branch.
Theo rushes toward the brown-haired boy who has fallen and injured his leg on the grass.
Roland sits on the ground, staring at his bloodied knee with a stoic and quiet expression.
Observing the injury, Theo notes it looks painful but realizes Roland is not going to cry. Theo uses his unique healing abilities, causing a bright green light to emanate from his hand.
Roland is completely amazed, stating he has never seen healing magic work with such incredible speed.
Theo explains that everyone mocks him because his magic is for healing rather than for attacking.
Lady Isabel approaches the two boys in the garden, calling out to her younger brother Theo.
Isabel admits she was worried when she couldn't find him, teasingly calling him a handful.
Roland looks up at the kind woman with a curious and slightly confused expression on his face.
Isabel offers a gentle smile as she realizes that her brother was actually playing with a friend.
Taking them both by the hand, the kind sister says it is time to return to the party.
Theo asks his sister if the queen will be angry at her for paying him attention.
Isabel looks away sadly, her silence revealing the difficult reality of her life within the palace.
Standing with Roland, Theo waves goodbye as his sister walks back toward the royal party.
The two boys watch her leave, reflecting on the shared loneliness of their lives at court.
From a distance, the cold queen watches the group with a piercing and deeply resentful expression.
Theo reacts with a sudden shiver of fear as he senses the queen's hostile gaze upon him.
Narrative text reveals the queen could not forgive Isabel for showing kindness to the illegitimate prince.
The young prince is suddenly and unilaterally informed that he is to join the military immediately.
Theo realizes they want him dead and are tearing him away from the center of politics.
Looking deeply dejected, the boy reflects on being unwanted and targeted for elimination by the court.
Theo worries that a female superior will be a burden, but his expectations are about to change.
Patricia Alvain holds Theo's face, her radiant presence immediately catching the young prince off guard.
Theo blushes deeply as the beautiful captain maintains a very close and intimate proximity to him.
Patricia playfully pinches and stretches Theo's cheeks, teasing him about his reaction to her bold touch.
A close-up of Theo's eye captures his utter shock and confusion during their first meeting.
A loud scream of shock echoes throughout the vast training grounds of the military fortress.
Narrative text explains that life in the army was incredibly harsh for the young, sheltered prince. Theo struggles to keep pace with the other soldiers during a grueling run through the castle grounds.
The young prince collapses from sheer exhaustion while his fellow soldiers look on with amusement.
Standing alone in the stone hallway, Theo looks physically drained by the relentless military drills.
Patricia approaches Theo, noting with a smile that he does not look very happy today.
Pumping her fist, Patricia enthusiastically declares that training builds a sound body and sound magic. The red-haired woman laughs brightly, her vibrant energy contrasting with the prince's obvious physical fatigue. Theo dryly jokes that if she keeps training so hard, her brain will turn into muscle.
Laughing, Patricia aggressively rubs the prince's head and tells him to turn his brain to muscle too.
The captain suddenly pulls the flustered young man into a tight and very close physical embrace.
Theo blushes furiously, admitting to himself that he no longer thinks of her as an older sister.
Patricia beams with joy while holding the prince, who is clearly overwhelmed by his growing feelings.
A close-up of Theo's face reveals his inner turmoil as he struggles with his deepening affection.
Walking through the courtyard, Theo stops to look at a small white bird resting on the ground.
A small, light blue bird rests peacefully on a soft white cloth, recovering from its injuries.
Looking at the helpless bird, Theo feels a deep connection to its loneliness and shared vulnerability. Rather than abandoning the creature, Theo decides to nurse it back to health in his quarters.
Theo tells Patricia he must bring the bird along because it requires frequent feeding and care. Theo imagines Patricia will strictly refuse his request to keep the bird with him during training.
Patricia playfully surprises the prince by asking if that rejection was what he expected her to say.
The little bird chirps happily from its basket, signaling its improving health and spirit to them.
Patricia looks at the bird with a warm, genuine affection that softens her usual military persona.
Theobald blushes intensely, struck by the unexpected tenderness and radiant beauty of his red-haired superior officer.
Theo teases the captain about having a cute side, prompting Patricia to burst into bright laughter.
Patricia jokingly feigns offense at being called cute, while Theo reacts with a comical look of terror.
While carrying Theo at night, Patricia's life story transforms the prince's growing affection into deep love.
Under the starlight, Patricia's expression turns somber as she begins to share her painful family history.
Patricia reveals that her mother died during childbirth, leading her entire family to despise her existence.
She admits she was powerless against their hatred, describing her early life as an unavoidable pain.
Finding no place at home, Patricia explains that she joined the army at only 13 years old.
The red-haired woman expresses happiness because the military judges people solely on their actual skills and abilities.
Patricia encourages Theo by stating she wants his hard work to be recognized and bring him happiness.
She tells him that while birth is unchangeable, he can choose the life he lives from now.
Theo realizes that Patricia carries the same emotional scars of being unwanted that he has always felt.
Noticing his sadness, Patricia tells Theo not to look so down and offers him a comforting smile.
As Patricia touches him, Theo experiences a pivotal moment of clarity regarding his new purpose in life.
Watching Patricia walk ahead, Theo feels inspired by her strength and the hope she has given him.
Theo resolves to one day grow strong enough to protect the woman who currently protects him.
During training, the prince is knocked to the ground but refuses to give up despite the struggle.
Determination burns in Theo's eyes as he pushes himself to overcome his weaknesses in the training grounds.
Despite worrying she might mock his youth, Theo remains focused on becoming a man worthy of her.
Clutching his sword, the white-haired prince prepares to strike back with renewed vigor and focused intent.
Patricia watches Theo's progress with a calm, observant gaze, noting the change in his fighting spirit.
The mood shifts as the knights gather to receive orders for an upcoming and dangerous military mission.
The atmosphere turns heavy as the soldiers realize the mission is essentially a death sentence for them.
Theo understands the queen intends to seize the wealthy mines of Aricia through a surprise illegal invasion.
The royal court plans to invade the neighboring border without a formal declaration to fix national finances.
Theo realizes the queen wants him to die in battle to justify the war against their neighbors. The prince stands frozen in horror, realizing the queen is sacrificing the knight order he truly loves. Theo feels the weight of guilt, believing everyone will die simply because of his presence in the unit.
Theobald is visibly shaken by the realization of the queen's cruel and calculated political maneuvering.
Theo watches Patricia from behind, overwhelmed by the fear of losing the person most important to him.
Dark shadows fall over Theo's face as he wonders if even the captain will eventually hate him.
Patricia turns back toward the prince, sensing his distress during the quiet moonlit night at the camp.
Sitting together in the darkness, Theo asks Patricia if the current dire situation is actually his fault.
Theo wonders if Patricia already knows the truth behind the mission and is staying silent for him. He contemplates whether he should confess his true feelings to the captain before their potentially fatal mission.
Theo believes that telling her how he feels would allow him to die without any lingering regrets.
The captain looks at him and softly urges Theo to make sure he comes back alive.
Theo realizes that now is not the time for a final confession meant only for his peace.
The prince firmly decides that he must survive the coming battle so he can remain with her.
Seeing the ribbon he gave her in Patricia's hair gives Theo the courage to face his fate. The cruel reality of war hits as Theo kneels beside a fallen comrade on the dusty battlefield.
A blood-stained hand reaches out, signifying the tragic and rapidly approaching end for a beloved life.
Covered in blood and tears, Theo resolves to change the horrific circumstances of the battle.
Gasping for air, the white-haired prince wakes up suddenly in a strange, quiet bedroom.
Still disoriented, Theo holds his head and asks the nearby officer about his current location.
The officer explains they are in the Resendez-Margraves territory near the recently attacked border.
Looking at a map, Theo realizes the queen used his unit as a political shield.
A close-up of Theo's eye reveals the sharp terror and realization dawning upon the prince.
Theo bolsters himself and demands to know the current location of his captain, Patricia Alvain.
The officer remains silent, his somber and downcast expression signaling a truly tragic outcome for Theo. The officer delivers the devastating news that the prince is the sole survivor of the unit.
Staring at his trembling hands, Theo struggles to process the sudden loss of his entire order.
Theo clutches his head in despair, his face contorted by the weight of unbearable grief.
A heavy silence follows the confirmation that no one else survived the queen's calculated military sacrifice.
Theo sits frozen in bed, the overwhelming reality of his loneliness sinking into his shattered spirit.
Shaking his head in disbelief, the young man whispers that this tragedy simply cannot be true.
A primal scream of agony erupts from the prince as he collapses under his immense sorrow.
A dark vow of vengeance stains the air as Theo resolves to kill his enemies.
Theo swears to destroy every person responsible for taking everything he ever loved and cherished.
A decorative title card marks a significant shift in the narrative as time begins to pass.
Resendez-Margrave, the leader of the anti-queen faction, is introduced as a powerful and noble ally.
Looking older and more determined, Theo tells the Margrave that he desires nothing but absolute revenge.
The Margrave cautions the young prince that pursuing revenge without proper support is a dangerous problem.
A cold determination burns in Theo's gaze as he prepares to make a life-changing decision.
Theo fondly remembers Patricia's encouraging words about his potential to one day become a great king. Theo resolves to claim the throne and become king once his quest for vengeance is finished.
Standing tall, the refined prince prepares to begin his long journey toward political and military power.
Theo looks away with a somber expression, promising to eventually become a truly good king.
Impressed by his resolve, the Margrave smiles and offers to lend Theo his full military power.
Theo immerses himself in the study of governance and strategy under the Margrave's expert, tireless guidance.
During a sparring session, the prince demonstrates his growing mastery of the sword against the officer.
The officer notes that Theo's inability to use offensive magic remains a tactical disadvantage for him.
Theo explains that he does have magic, but his specific talents are focused strictly on healing.
To prove his point, the prince suddenly draws a blade across his own arm, drawing blood.
Golden light emanates from Theo's hand as he instantly mends the fresh wound on his forearm.
The officer is stunned, realizing that Theo's instant healing abilities could make their entire army invincible.
Grinning with newfound confidence, the officer asks if this power makes them completely unstoppable in battle. Theo looks on with a calm and distant gaze, his focus entirely on the future war.
Theo reflects on his research, realizing that magic meant for healing can also be used destructively.
Deep in the forest, Theo and the officer are suddenly surrounded by a group of assassins.
Theo notes that stopping a heart is much easier than the complex task of healing one.
A sinister red glow fills Theo's eye as he prepares to unleash his new offensive magic. Theo uses his magic to rupture internal organs, causing the hooded assassins to collapse and vomit blood.
Standing amidst the bodies of his fallen enemies, a blood-splattered Theo looks cold and completely detached.
The officer watches Theo with a look of silent concern, noting the prince's increasingly ruthless nature.
Narrative text explains that the ceasefire condition required sending Theo's sister, Isabel, away as a hostage.
Theo is consumed by rage, realizing the queen is disposing of his kind sister as well.
Leading a massive cavalry charge, Theo raises his flag high as the rebellion officially begins.
Theo and the Margrave's army successfully breach the royal capital, reaching the heart of the palace.
Theo reflects on how easily people surrender when they witness lives being snuffed out so effortlessly.
Standing before a crowd, the Cold Prince executes his father and brothers to secure the throne. Theo laments that the Queen Dowager escaped, but he vows to eventually hunt her down.
A hand holds a blood-spattered crown, marking the grim end of a violent political struggle.
Theobald ascends the throne, yet despite achieving his goals, a profound sense of emptiness remains.
A vision of Patricia encourages Theo, promising he will become a truly great and fine king.
Theo pledges to work even harder for Patricia's sake as he begins his royal reign.
A somber message laments that Theo may only be able to reunite with her in death.
King Theobald sits upon his throne as a mysterious visitor stands before him in the hall.
The visitor, a man with grayish-brown hair, notes that a long time has passed since then.
Theo looks upon the man with a somber gaze, acknowledging that he is still alive.
Roland formally congratulates the new king on his hard-won ascension to the royal throne of Aricia.
The man offers a satisfied smile, pleased with the outcome of their long and difficult journey. Theo realizes Roland worked tirelessly to ensure the timing of the rebellion was absolutely perfect.
Confident in his automatic healing magic, Theo felt no fear despite knowing Roland was plotting something.
A sudden realization or call interrupts the king's quiet moment of reflection within the palace.
The morning sun shines over the palace gardens, where vibrant roses are in full bloom.
Theo reviews official documents, his expression turning serious as he encounters a specific and painful name.
A map detailing the Alvain Count family reminds Theo of the people who once hurt Patricia.
Recalling how they abused her, Theo considers crushing the heartless Alvain family for Patricia's sake.
Theo summons the Alvain family to the palace, though his motives extend beyond simple, lingering anger. The king observes a red-haired woman standing before him with a look of quiet, stoic intensity.
A young red-haired woman stands amidst flowers, her appearance striking a deep chord within the king.
Shocked, Theo calls out Patricia's name, unable to believe the vision standing before his eyes.
Theo questions the woman's identity, noting that her current age does not match his vivid memories.
Theo recognizes her familiar habit of speaking without thinking and carelessly calling him by his nickname.
Theo recalls how she was always hopelessly disorganized when dealing with the military's administrative paperwork.
He fondly remembers the rough, energetic way she used to wake him up every single morning.
Theo notes that her stubbornness and refusal to change her mind remain exactly the same today. Theo finally understands that the Margrave's army found Patricia as a child on the battlefield. The king wonders if his powerful healing magic worked too well on her previously broken body.
Overwhelmed with joy, Theo resolves to never let her go now that they are finally reunited.
Theo reflects on waiting for her to grow up before proposing marriage after her social debut.
A gentle hand reaches out to clasp another, signifying a promise of eternal loyalty and love.
Now fully grown, Theo and Patricia share an intimate and quiet moment within the palace grounds.
Theo blushes deeply as he experiences the overwhelming affection he has always felt for his captain.
Patricia appears flustered and caught off guard by the king's sudden and intense physical proximity.
Theo asks Patricia to stay by his side forever, his request filled with earnest and deep desperation.
Patricia realizes her once cute Theo has grown into a man capable of easily breaking many hearts.
Theo embraces Patricia, admitting that having her as his official fiancée feels just like a dream.
Patricia yelps in surprise as the king holds her tightly, her face flushing a bright red.
Feeling his warm breath against her skin, Patricia becomes incredibly flustered by Theo's romantic advances.
Theo confesses his past despair and the joy of watching her grow up so closely beside him.
Patricia jokingly scolds the king, suggesting he should have kept those embarrassing thoughts to himself.
Patricia feels overwhelmed by the sweet words Theo has been holding back for so many years.
Patricia attempts to drag Theo back to his royal duties, insisting they return to work immediately. The king reluctantly agrees to end their moment, though he clearly wishes to stay with her.
A loud, comical wail echoes through the palace as someone struggles with their immense internal turmoil.
Patricia panics in the bath, realizing her wedding is only a year away with no escape.
Lacking confidence, Patricia jokingly wonders if her physical strength can solve the challenges of being queen.
Though she intends to honor Theo's feelings, Patricia still feels the heavy weight of her responsibility.
Splashing water on her face, Patricia tells herself to stop moping and face her future boldly.
Looking elegant in her dark gown, Patricia walks through the palace, ready to meet her fate.
Patricia turns her head, her attention caught by someone calling out to her.
Roland greets Patricia with a wave, praising her hard work and using her mukbang. Roland wonders if he should stop using an informal nickname for the future queen. Patricia asks Roland to treat her exactly as he always has, despite any public difficulties.
Roland asks Patricia for an update on her recent sparring match with the game.
Gritting her teeth in frustration, Patricia begrudgingly admits that she lost the training match.
Patricia reflects on her total defeat, admitting she mistakenly thought they were on equal footing.
Roland and Patricia walk together through the palace, continuing their conversation about her recent duel.
Roland laughs as Patricia remains visibly annoyed by the outcome of her previous sparring session. Patricia's expression shifts to a somber, thoughtful look as she walks alongside her companion.
A sudden realization causes Patricia to pause, her gaze turning away with a serious expression.
Roland notes that it is rare to see Patricia react with such visible internal hesitation.
Roland teasingly asks Patricia to share her thoughts while she reacts with an annoyed groan. Clenching her hands, Patricia asks Roland what specific skills he thinks a queen should have.
Roland explains that public duties and socializing are important, while Patricia quietly acknowledges his answer. Roland adds that being the king's emotional support is a queen's most vital, central responsibility. Patricia considers Roland's words, her expression softening as she processes the meaning of his advice.
With a bright smile, Patricia confidently declares her readiness to be the king's emotional support.